I reached across the food court table, grabbed my son's fist, and pried his fingers open one by one. 7 coins. A dime, a nickel. 5 quarters. $1.40. Sitting in the palm of a 38-year-old man who made more money in a week than I made in a month. He tried to pull his hand back. I wouldn't let him. Nathan, I said, where's your truck? He wouldn't look at me. And that's when I knew. What I found out over the next hour wasn't about money. It was about a voicemail. A brother-in-law. And a lie my son had been living for almost 2 years, and the reason he never called me was worse than anything I imagined. Tell me what city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has traveled. And if you believe a mother should never stop noticing, subscribe, and stay with me to the end. My name is Margaret Collins. Everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 64 years old. I worked 31 years in administration for a school board. And I raised one child, Nathan, mostly on my own after his father died when Nathan was 11. Tell you that so you understand something. I am not a dramatic woman. I don't cry at commercials. I don't make scenes. In 31 years of work, I never once raised my voice at a colleague. I balance budgets. I filed paperwork. I noticed when a number was wrong on page 4 of a 40-page report. Noticing is what I do. It's the only real skill I ever had. And for almost 2 years, I didn't notice a thing. It was a Tuesday in October. Cold, but not the kind of cold that makes you hurry, just the kind that makes you zip your coat and think about soup. I'd had a dentist appointment downtown, and I cut through the Rideau Center because I always cut through the Rideau Center. It's warm, it's on the way, and the escalators save my knees. I wasn't looking for anything. I want that on the record. I wasn't worried about my son. I wasn't suspicious. I was thinking about whether I had enough bread at home to make toast. Then I came around the corner by the food court and I stopped walking. There was a man standing near the entrance, alone in a canvas work jacket with a torn pocket. He was staring down into his hand. Counting. And my whole body knew before my brain caught up. That's the thing nobody tells you about being a mother. Your body recognizes your child before your mind gives permission. I've picked him out of a crowd of 200 kids at a school assembly. I've heard his cough through a wall. I knew that man was Nathan before I could see his face. I didn't call out right away. I stood there. I'm ashamed of this. I stood there for maybe 8 seconds, and I watched him. He counted the coins once. Then he put them back in his pocket. Then he took them out and counted them again. Then he looked up at the menu board. Then he looked back at his hand. Then he put the coins in his pocket. Turned toward the exit. And started walking away without buying anything. Nathan. He froze. Not turned. Froze. His shoulders came up around his ears, like a man who'd been caught doing something. Nathan Collins. He turned around slowly. And he had a smile on his face that I want to tell you about. Because I'm still seeing it at 3 in the morning some nights. It was a good smile. It was a professional smile. It was the smile of a man who had practiced it. Mom, he said. Hey, what are you doing downtown? Dentist, I said. What are you doing downtown? Nothing. Just errands. Errands. Yeah. Come sit with me. Got to. Nathan, I took his arm. Come sit with me. I'll buy you lunch. And that's when he did something that changed everything. He flinched. I said the words, I'll buy you lunch, and my 38-year-old son, who once carried a full sheet of drywall up 2 flights of stairs on a bet, flinched like I'd raised my hand at him. You don't have to do that, he said. I know I don't have to. No, I'm not hungry. You were reading the menu board for a full minute. I was just, he stopped. He looked at the floor. I was killing time. I have never in my life been a woman who pushes. My mother pushed. My mother pushed until my father stopped speaking at dinner, Angelus, and I promised myself I'd never be that. Angelus, I pushed anyway. Angelus, sit down, I said. Angelus, please. Angelus, we sat at one of those little round tables by the window. Angelus, the ones that wobble no matter which way you turn them. Angelus, he kept his jacket on. He sat on the edge of the chair like a man at a bus station. Angelus, ready to leave. Angelus, I bought 2 coffees. He tried to give me money for his, and I said no, and he got, I want to say, upset, Angelus, but it was smaller than that. Angelus, it was tighter than that. Mom, let me pay for my own coffee. Angelus, it's $2. Angelus, that's not the point. Angelus, then what's the point? He didn't answer. He wrapped both hands around the cup and stared into it. Angelus, I let the quiet sit there. 31 years in an office teaches you that silence is a tool, Angelus, not an accident. Most people can't stand it. Angelus, they'll fill it with anything. Angelus, Nathan filled it after about 40 seconds. Angelus, how was the dentist? Angelus, fine. Angelus, that's good. Angelus, Nathan. Angelus, yeah. Angelus, open your hand. Angelus, he looked up. What? Angelus, your right hand. Angelus, open it. Angelus, Mom. Angelus, open it. Angelus, why are you? I reached across the table and took his wrist. Angelus, and here's what I didn't expect. Angelus, he didn't fight me. He was easily twice my strength. He works construction. Could have pulled away without thinking about it. Angelus, he let me open his fingers like he was too tired to argue. Angelus, 7 coins. Angelus, a dime. Angelus, a nickel. Angelus, 5 quarters. Angelus, we both looked at it. Angelus, that's $1.40, I said. Angelus, I know what it is. Angelus, Nathan, where's your wallet? Angelus, I've got a wallet. Then where's the money in it? Pulled his hand back and shoved the coins in his pocket and said, Angelus, in a voice I didn't recognize, Angelus, can we not do this here? Angelus, do what? This. I'm asking my son why he's counting change in a mall. Angelus, and I'm telling you it's fine, Mom. Angelus, it's fine. Angelus, it's a system. Angelus, that word. Angelus, system. He said it like a man reciting something. What system? Angelus, it's look. Angelus, it's a budgeting thing. Angelus, Alyssa handles the accounts. Angelus, we do it weekly. Angelus, it's fine. Angelus, it's actually really smart. Most couples don't. Angelus, weekly. Angelus, yeah. Angelus, you get money weekly. Angelus, it's budgeting, Mom. Angelus, how much? Angelus, he laughed. Wasn't a laugh. Angelus, come on. Angelus, how much, Nathan? Angelus, why does that matter? Angelus, how much do you get every week? Angelus, and he said, Angelus, so quietly I almost missed it under the noise of the food court. Angelus, 40. I want to explain to you what happened in my chest at that moment. It wasn't shock. Angelus, shock is loud. Angelus, this was the opposite. Angelus, it was like a floor dropping away very quietly. Angelus, in a room where nobody else notices. Angelus, $40. Angelus, it's fine. Angelus, $40 a week. Angelus, Mom, you made $94,000 last year. Angelus, you told me at Christmas. You were proud of it. You said you finally got the supervisor bump and you were going to... Angelus, I know what I said. Where does it go, Nathan? Angelus, it goes into the house. Angelus, it goes into the accounts. Angelus, it goes into she handles it. Angelus, okay, she's better at it than me. Angelus, I'm on a site 14 hours a day. Angelus, I don't have time to sit there with a calculator. Angelus, and she offered. Angelus, and it's normal. Angelus, Mom, married people do this, you and Dad. Your father and I had one account and we both had a card to it. Angelus, he stopped. Angelus, both of us, Nathan. Angelus, I could see every dollar. Angelus, he could see every dollar. We argued about a snowblower for 6 weeks because we could both see it. That's not the same thing as what you just described to me. He didn't say anything. Angelus, and then I asked the question. The one that ended up being the only question that mattered. Angelus, I don't even know why I asked it. It just came out the way a thing comes out when your brain has been quietly adding up a column of numbers you didn't know you were reading. Because I'd been sitting there for 10 minutes and something was wrong and I couldn't name it, Angelus, and then I could. Angelus, he walked into the mall. Angelus, from the north entrance. I saw him come around the corner by the escalators. Angelus, the parking garage is the other way. Angelus, Nathan, I said. Where's your truck? Angelus, I have replayed his face for 2 years. He didn't look guilty. That's what I'd expected, the little boy guilt. Angelus, the eye broke it and I'm sorry. Angelus, that would have been survivable. Angelus, what I saw instead was fear. Angelus, his eyes went sideways. Angelus, not down. Angelus, sideways toward the doors, like he was checking whether someone had heard me. Angelus, it's at the house, he said. Angelus, you drove. Angelus, no. Then how did you get downtown? Angelus, bus. Angelus, since when do you take the bus? Angelus, it's fine, Mom. Nathan, that truck cost you $51,000. Angelus, you saved for it for 4 years. You wouldn't let me eat a hamburger in it. Angelus, I remember. Angelus, so why are you on a bus? 'Cause Alyssa's got it. Angelus, today. Angelus, he didn't answer. Angelus, Nathan, Alyssa's got it today. Angelus, he picked up his coffee, put it down without drinking it. Angelus, how long has Alyssa had your truck? Angelus, nothing. Angelus, how long? And he said, and I swear to you, his voice cracked in the middle of the word like he was 15 again. Angelus, a while. Angelus, a while. Angelus, yeah. Nathan, look at me. Angelus, how long is a while? Angelus, since I don't know. Angelus, since last winter. Angelus, last winter. Angelus, it's an insurance thing. Angelus, he said, and now the words came fast. Angelus, tumbling, rehearsed. Angelus, and that's how I knew they weren't his. Angelus, it's cheaper if she's the primary driver. Angelus, her record's clean. Angelus, mine's got that thing from 2011. Angelus, and if she's primary, the premium drops like $90 a month. Angelus, and it's my truck. Angelus, it's still in my name. Angelus, it's just on paper, it's better. Angelus, so it's just smarter. Mom, it's smarter. Angelus, Nathan, and I'm on sites all day anyway. Angelus, I don't need it during the day. Angelus, Nathan. Angelus, and the buses go right past the sites. Angelus, most of them, so it's actually my. Angelus, Nathan. I said it loud enough that a woman at the next table looked over. Angelus, he stopped. Angelus, you carry tools, I said. Angelus, he blinked. Angelus, you carry tools, Nathan. Told me you carry a bag that weighs 60 pounds. Are you telling me you take a 60-pound bag on the OC Transpo? Angelus, in January. Angelus, and my son, my strong. Angelus, capable, 6'1" son who has never once in his adult life complained about anything, looked at the table and said, Angelus, 2 buses. Angelus, there's a transfer at St. Angelus, Laurent. Stop here for a second and tell you what I did next. Angelus, because I've thought about it 1,000 times, and I still don't know if it was right. Angelus, I didn't cry. Angelus, I didn't yell. I didn't say that, woman. Angelus, which is what I was screaming inside my own skull. Put my hands flat on the table and I made myself count to 5. Angelus, because I've seen this before. Not with him, with a woman I worked with. Angelus, years ago. Angelus, named Denise. Denise came in one Monday with her hair cut short, and I said something nice about it, and she said, Angelus, he picked it, Angelus, and laughed, Angelus, and I laughed, Angelus, and I went back to my desk, and I did nothing for 2 years, Angelus, and when it finally came apart, Angelus, and Denise was sitting in the break room with everything she owned in a gym bag, Angelus, she said something to me I have never forgotten, Angelus, she said, you know what kept me there, Angelus, everybody who could have helped me got mad at him. Nobody ever just asked me a question. Angelus, anger is a door closing. Angelus, Denise told me. Angelus, every time somebody got angry on her behalf, Angelus, she had to defend him because defending him was cheaper than admitting what she'd let happen. Angelus, so I counted to 5. Angelus, and I asked a question. Angelus, Nathan, can I ask you something? Angelus, and you don't have to answer. Angelus, he looked up wary. Angelus, do you know your own bank balance? Angelus, long pause. Angelus, not exactly. Angelus, roughly. Angelus, no. Angelus, do you have online access to it? Angelus, I had a login. Angelus, had. Angelus, it stopped working. Angelus, like a year ago. Angelus, it was a whole thing. Angelus, she called them, they said. Angelus, did you call them? Angelus, he opened his mouth. Angelus, closed it. Angelus, Nathan, did you ever call the bank yourself? Angelus, she said she handled it. Angelus, and you never checked. Angelus, when would I check? Angelus, Mom. And there it was, the first flash of heat. Angelus, the first real thing he'd said all afternoon. Angelus, when? At 6 in the morning. Angelus, at 9 at night. Angelus, I get home. Angelus, I eat what's on the counter. Angelus, I fall asleep on the couch. Angelus, I get up and I do it again. You want me to spend my Sunday fighting with a call center. Angelus, do you know how tired I am? Angelus, yes, I said. Angelus, I do. Angelus, he stopped. Angelus, breathing hard. Angelus, I do know how tired you are, honey. Angelus, that's what I'm looking at right now. Angelus, and that's when his chin went. Angelus, just for a second. Angelus, he caught it. Angelus, but I saw it. Don't, he said. Angelus, don't what? Don't do the mom thing. Don't look at me like that. Like what? Like I'm pathetic. Angelus, I said. Nathan. Angelus, I have never once in my life thought. Angelus, and my son said. Angelus, you should hear the way you sound right now. Angelus, his phone buzzed on the table. Angelus, I saw the screen light up. Angelus, I wasn't trying to look. Angelus, it was face up. Angelus, 6 inches from my hand. Alyssa, 4. Angelus, 4. Angelus, she'd called 4 times. And Nathan, this is the part that I couldn't unsee. Angelus, this is the part that told me everything the coins hadn't. Nathan looked at that phone the way you look at a dog you're not sure about. Angelus, he didn't reach for it. Angelus, he waited for it to stop. Angelus, it stopped. Angelus, then it started again. Angelus, you should get that, I said. Angelus, it's fine. Angelus, 5 calls, Nathan. Angelus, she just wants to know where I am. Angelus, does she not know where you are? I'm supposed to be at the Tim's on Rideau at 1. Angelus, I looked at my watch. Angelus, it was 1:20. Angelus, supposed to be. Angelus, that's where she picks me up. Angelus, she picks you up. Angelus, after work. Angelus, yeah. Angelus, Nathan, it's Tuesday afternoon. Why aren't you at work? Angelus, and there it was. The thing under the thing. Angelus, he went completely still. Angelus, Nathan. Angelus, there's a slowdown. Angelus, what kind of slowdown? Angelus, the Kanata build got pushed. Angelus, weather and a permit thing. We're down to 3 days a week till they sort it out. Angelus, for how long? Angelus, not 6 weeks. Angelus, 6 weeks. Angelus, Nathan, why didn't you tell me? I could, 'cause then you'd want to help, he said. Angelus, flat. Angelus, like it was obvious. Angelus, like I was slow. Angelus, yes, I said. Angelus, that's what I'd want to do. Angelus, I'd want to help my son. Angelus, and then what? Angelus, what do you mean? Angelus, and then what? Angelus, and then what? Angelus, Mom, he leaned forward. Angelus, and his voice dropped. Angelus, and it was almost gentle. Angelus, which made it so much worse. Then you give me money. Angelus, and then it goes in the account. Angelus, and then it's gone. Angelus, and now you're out $400, and I'm exactly where I was, and I have to look at you at Christmas, knowing you're keeping score. Angelus, that's what. Angelus, I heard it. I want you to hear it too, Angelus, because it took me 3 days to fully understand what I'd just been told. Then it goes in the account. Angelus, and then it's gone. Angelus, he knew. Some part of him knew exactly what was happening. Angelus, he had it all mapped out. Angelus, he just didn't have a word for it. Angelus, and he didn't have a door. Angelus, Nathan, I said. Angelus, that's not how helping works. Angelus, that's how it works at my house. Angelus, the phone rang a 6th time. This time he picked it up. Angelus, he turned slightly away from me. Angelus, which he has never done in his life. Angelus, and he said, Angelus, hey. Angelus, no, I'm here. I'm at the mall. Angelus, I walked over. Angelus, because the Tim's was packed. Angelus, no. Angelus, no, I didn't. Angelus, Alyssa. Angelus, I didn't buy anything. He said that last part looking at the table. Angelus, I didn't buy anything. And then he said something, and I heard it, and I felt my hands go cold on that coffee cup. Do you want me to show you the receipt? Angelus, there was no receipt. Angelus, that was the point. He was offering to prove a negative. He was offering to prove he hadn't spent $1.40. Angelus, a pause. Her voice on the other end, I could hear the shape of it. Angelus, not the words. Angelus, fast. Angelus, even. Angelus, not yelling. Angelus, somehow that was worse. Angelus, then Nathan said, Angelus, no, I know. Angelus, I know. Angelus, you're right. Angelus, okay. Angelus, 20 minutes. Okay. Angelus, no, I'm alone. Angelus, he looked at me. Angelus, he looked right at me. Angelus, and he said into the phone. Angelus, yeah. Angelus, I'm alone. Angelus, and he hung up. Angelus, we sat there. Angelus, Nathan, I said. Angelus, don't. You just told your wife you were alone. Angelus, Mom. Angelus, why? 'Cause it's easier. Angelus, easier than what? Angelus, easier than the next 3 hours. Angelus, and he slammed his hand flat on the table, not hard. Angelus, but the coffee jumped. Angelus, and the woman at the next table gathered her bag and moved. Angelus, and Nathan put his face in his hands and said, God. Angelus, I'm sorry. Angelus, I'm sorry. Angelus, it's okay. Angelus, it's not okay. Angelus, I don't do that. Angelus, I know you don't. Angelus, I've never done that. Angelus, I know, honey. He rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands. Angelus, hard the way he did when he was 7 and trying not to cry in front of his father. Angelus, then he said, Angelus, into his hands. Angelus, she doesn't like you. Angelus, I already knew. But hearing it out loud is a different animal. Angelus, since when? Angelus, since always. Since the wedding. Angelus, what did I do? Angelus, nothing. Angelus, you didn't do anything. Angelus, he looked up. Angelus, his eyes were red. Angelus, that's what I keep, Mom. Angelus, you didn't do anything. Angelus, it's not a thing that happened. Angelus, it's just started small. Angelus, she'd say you were a lot. Angelus, then it was that you have opinions. Angelus, then it was. Angelus, your mother thinks I'm not good enough for you. Angelus, and I'd say that's not true, and she'd say, Angelus, you're taking her side. Angelus, and then it'd be 4 hours and I'd be apologizing at midnight for something I didn't say. Angelus, and what did you do? Angelus, I stopped bringing you up. Angelus, he said simply. Angelus, it was easier. That's why you didn't come at Easter. Angelus, yeah. Angelus, you said Derek had the flu. Angelus, yeah. Angelus, and Thanksgiving. Angelus, the Kanata deadline. Didn't answer. Angelus, Nathan. Was there a Kanata deadline? There's always a Kanata deadline. Was there one on Thanksgiving? Angelus, he said no. Angelus, I sat back in my chair. Angelus, 14 months. Counted them right there at that wobbly table. 14 months of phone calls that got shorter, of texts answered 9 hours later. Angelus, of sorry, Mom. Angelus, crazy week. Angelus, of me telling my friend Barb at the church. Angelus, oh, he's just busy. Angelus, he's got a big life now. Angelus, you know how it is when they marry. Angelus, I had a theory for it. Angelus, I had a nice, Angelus, comfortable, Angelus, self-flattering theory. Angelus, my son is happy. Angelus, my son is busy. Angelus, I raised him to be independent and look, he is. I built that theory out of nothing but the absence of evidence. 31 years in administration, and I never once asked for the source document. Angelus, Nathan, who's living in your house. Angelus, what? Angelus, Derek. Angelus, is Derek still there? Angelus, he hesitated. Angelus, and that hesitation was an answer. Angelus, he's still there. Angelus, yeah. Angelus, it's been almost 2 years. Angelus, he's between things. Angelus, between what things? Angelus, he's doing a certificate. Angelus, online. Angelus, in what? Angelus, project management. Angelus, for 2 years. Angelus, it's part-time. Angelus, does he pay rent? Angelus, Nathan laughed. Angelus, actually laughed. Angelus, this time. Angelus, and it was the ugliest sound I'd heard all day. Angelus, Mom, I don't know what anybody pays. Angelus, does he work? Angelus, he does stuff around the house. Angelus, what stuff? Angelus, Nathan stopped. He genuinely tried to think of something. Angelus, I watched him try. Angelus, he does the groceries. Angelus, with your money. Angelus, with our money. Angelus, Nathan, whose name is on the mortgage. Angelus, mine. Angelus, just yours. Angelus, dot both. Angelus, both or hers. Angelus, both. Angelus, I think. You think? Angelus, we did a refinance last year, he said. Angelus, there was a thing with the rate. Angelus, she had it all set up. Angelus, we went in, I signed. You signed what? Angelus, papers, Mom. Angelus, you sign a stack of papers. Angelus, have you ever done a mortgage? Angelus, it's 40 pages and the lady's talking and everybody wants to be done and you sign where the little tab is. Angelus, did you read them? Angelus, he looked at me. Angelus, and in the silence. Angelus, my son said the loudest thing anybody said to me that whole day. Angelus, she was right there. Angelus, I need to tell you something. Angelus, and I'm not proud of it. There was a moment, Angelus, right then, Angelus, where I almost got up and left. Angelus, not out of anger. Angelus, out of cowardice. Angelus, because I could feel the size of it. Angelus, I could feel it the way you feel a weather front. Angelus, this was not going to be a conversation. This was going to be lawyers and paperwork and years. Angelus, and I was 64. Angelus, and I had a bad hip. Angelus, and I had a life that was small and quiet and mine. Angelus, and there was a version of me that could have said, Angelus, well, he's a grown man. Angelus, and gone home and made toast. Angelus, I've met that version of me. Angelus, she's very reasonable. Angelus, she's got 100 good reasons. And she is exactly why Denise sat in that break room with a gym bag. Angelus, so I stayed. Angelus, I said, Nathan, Angelus, I'm going to ask you one more question and then I'll stop. Angelus, I promise. Angelus, okay. Angelus, are you happy? He didn't answer. I want you to understand what that silence was like. Angelus, the food court was full. There was a espresso machine screaming somewhere. Kid was having a meltdown about a soft pretzel. Angelus, two teenagers were laughing at a video. And in the middle of all that, Angelus, my son sat completely still with his hands around a cold coffee and did not answer. Angelus, 5 seconds. Angelus, 10, 15. I've had 30-second silences in my life. Angelus, I have never had one that long. Angelus, and then he shook his head. Angelus, once. Angelus, barely. Like a man admitting to something in court. Angelus, how long, I said. Angelus, Mom, how long, Nathan? Angelus, and he said, Angelus, I don't remember the last time I was. Angelus, okay, I said. Angelus, okay. Angelus, okay. Here's what we're going to do. Angelus, Mom, no. Angelus, no, no, no. Angelus, he was already shaking his head. Angelus, already reaching for his coat. This is why I didn't. Angelus, sit down. Angelus, you're going to make it worse. Angelus, Nathan. Angelus, you don't understand. Angelus, and now he was loud. Angelus, and now people were looking. Angelus, you don't get it. Angelus, you think you're going to march in there and say your piece and everything's fixed and you go home. Angelus, you don't have to live there. Angelus, I do. I have to go back tonight. Angelus, you get to leave. Angelus, I let him finish. Angelus, and then I said, Angelus, very quietly, Angelus, I'm not going to say a word to her. Angelus, he stopped. Angelus, what? Angelus, I'm not going to call her. Angelus, I'm not going to text her. Angelus, I'm not going to show up at your door. I'm not going to say your name in a room she's in. Nathan, look at me, I am not going to fight her. Stared at me like I'd started speaking another language. Then what are you going to do? Angelus, and I told him the truest thing I know. The thing 31 years of budgets and audits and minutes and file cabinets taught me. It's the thing that is worth more than every feeling I have ever had. Angelus, feelings can be denied, I said. Angelus, evidence can't. Angelus, he blinked. Angelus, she can tell you that you agreed to something. Angelus, she can tell you that you're difficult. Can tell you that you don't remember it right. Angelus, she can tell you your own mother is the problem. And you can't argue with any of that. Angelus, honey, because it's all feelings. Angelus, and she's better at feelings than you are. Angelus, she'll win every single time. Angelus, so. So we're not going to have feelings, I said. Angelus, we're going to have paper. Angelus, he sat back down. Angelus, slowly. Like a man setting down something heavy he'd forgotten he was carrying. Angelus, what kind of paper, he said. Angelus, every kind. Angelus, employment records. Angelus, every pay stub you can find. Your T4s. Angelus, the mortgage documents, the originals. Angelus, not whatever you signed at the desk. The vehicle registration. Angelus, your insurance policy. Every text message where anybody said anything about money. Angelus, I don't have any of that. Angelus, your employer has your pay stubs. Angelus, the land registry has your mortgage. Angelus, the province has your registration. Nathan, none of that lives in your house. Angelus, that's the whole point. Angelus, it's not in a drawer she controlled. Angelus, it's in a system. Angelus, he was quiet. Angelus, then he said, Angelus, the truck's still in my name. Angelus, you're sure? I watched something come across his face. Angelus, and it wasn't hope exactly. Angelus, it was worse than hope. It was a man realizing he'd never even thought to check. Angelus, I'd have had to sign something. Angelus, right, to change it. Angelus, you can't just, she couldn't just. Angelus, no, I said. Angelus, she couldn't just. Angelus, so it's mine. Angelus, say it again. Angelus, he looked at me. Angelus, say it again, Nathan. My truck. Angelus, louder. Angelus, Mom, we're in a mall. Angelus, I don't care. Angelus, and my son sat in the Rideau Center food court. Angelus, 38 years old. Angelus, $1.40 in his pocket, and said, Angelus, it's my truck. Angelus, he drove me no. Angelus, he walked me to the doors. That's the sentence I couldn't make my mouth say for a year. Angelus, my son walked me to the doors. Angelus, because my son didn't have a car. Angelus, at the exit. Angelus, he stopped. Angelus, Mom. Angelus, if we do this. Angelus, yes. Angelus, if we do this and it doesn't work. Angelus, then we'll know, I said, which is more than you have right now. Angelus, he nodded. Angelus, then he said, Angelus, there's something else? What? Angelus, it's no. Angelus, it's nothing. Angelus, Nathan. Angelus, it's Derek. Something in the air changed. Angelus, I felt it on my arms. What about Derek? Angelus, he said something. Angelus, a while back. Angelus, said what? Angelus, it's nothing. Angelus, he was drunk. Angelus, Nathan, what did Derek say to you? Angelus, and my son who has never been afraid of anything. Angelus, who once fell 12 feet off a scaffold and got up laughing. Angelus, who I have watched carry his own father's casket at 11 years old without shedding a tear until he got home. My son looked out through those glass doors at the parking lot and said, Angelus, he didn't say it to me. He left it on my phone. Angelus, he left what on your phone? Angelus, a message. Angelus, do you still have it? Angelus, long pause. Angelus, yeah, he said. Angelus, I never deleted it. Angelus, why not? And Nathan said something that has kept me awake more than the coins. Angelus, more than the bus. Angelus, more than the $40 a week. Because I wanted somebody to hear it. Angelus, in case something happened. The doors opened and the cold came in. Angelus, and then a black truck pulled up to the curb outside my son's truck. Angelus, his $51,000 truck. Angelus, the one he wouldn't let me eat a hamburger in, and it stopped in the fire lane with the hazards on. Angelus, Derek was driving. Angelus, Alyssa got out of the passenger side. Angelus, and she was smiling. Angelus, and she was lovely. Angelus, and she waved at me through the glass like we were old friends. Angelus, and beside me. Angelus, I felt my son's whole body change. Angelus, I mean it. Angelus, I felt it through the sleeve of his coat. Angelus, he got smaller. He straightened up and he got smaller. Angelus, and he put that practiced smile back on his face. Angelus, and under his breath. Angelus, without moving his lips. Angelus, he said 4 words to me. Angelus, Mom. Angelus, please. Angelus, not now. Angelus, and I smiled back at her. Smiled right back at that woman through 6 feet of glass. Angelus, and I waved. Angelus, and I said, Angelus, without moving my lips either. Angelus, Nathan, what's the password on your phone? He didn't answer me about the password. Angelus, he didn't get a chance to. The doors slid open and Alyssa came through them with her arms already out. Angelus, and she hugged me. Angelus, she hugged me. Angelus, 2 seconds. Angelus, maybe 3. Angelus, and she smelled like something expensive. Angelus, and she said into my ear, Angelus, Maggie, oh my gosh. Angelus, what are you doing here? Angelus, and I said, dentist. Angelus, you poor thing. Root canal. Angelus, cleaning. Angelus, well, that's not so bad. Angelus, 1:28 in the afternoon. Angelus, I want you to know I checked my watch. Angelus, because I had already started doing the thing I do. Angelus, the thing I did for 31 years. Angelus, which is to write everything down in my head with a timestamp on it. She let go of me and she turned to Nathan and she said, Angelus, in the sweetest voice you have ever heard in your life. Angelus, babe, I've been calling you. Angelus, and Nathan said, sorry. Phone was in my pocket. Angelus, 6 times. Angelus, I know. Angelus, I'm sorry. Angelus, I was worried. Angelus, I know. Angelus, I'm sorry. Angelus, 3 sorries. Angelus, I counted them. 3 sorries in 11 seconds for the crime of standing inside a building. Angelus, and then she looked at me. Angelus, and she smiled. Angelus, and she said, Angelus, did you two have a nice visit? Angelus, there it was. Angelus, that was the question. Angelus, that was the audit. Angelus, and before I could open my mouth, Angelus, Nathan said, Angelus, we just ran into each other. Angelus, like 2 minutes ago. Angelus, 2 minutes. We'd been sitting there for 55. Angelus, and that was the moment. Angelus, standing in the doorway of a shopping mall with the cold coming in around my ankles. Angelus, that I understood exactly how deep this went. Because my son didn't lie like a man who'd been caught. Angelus, he lied like a man who'd been trained. Angelus, smooth. Angelus, immediate. Angelus, no pause at all. He had the lie ready before she finished the question. Angelus, the way you keep a fire extinguisher by the stove. Angelus, and here's the part I'm ashamed of. Angelus, I said, that's right. 2 minutes. Angelus, I was just heading out. Angelus, I backed him up. Stood there and I lied to that woman's face for my son. Angelus, and I hated every syllable of it. Angelus, and I would do it again 100 times. Angelus, because in that second I finally understood the rules of the game I'd just been drafted into. You don't win this on the sidewalk. You don't win this by being right out loud. Alyssa's smile changed. Angelus, just slightly. Angelus, just a millimeter. Angelus, she said, well, Angelus, you should come for dinner sometime. I'd love that. Angelus, we'll set something up. Angelus, that'd be lovely. Nobody meant a word of it, and everybody knew it. Angelus, then she took my son's arm. Angelus, not held it. Angelus, took it. Angelus, and she steered him toward the doors. Angelus, and Derek was still in the driver's seat with his elbow out the window like he owned the building. Angelus, and Nathan looked back at me one time. Angelus, one time. Angelus, and he mouthed something. Angelus, I couldn't read it. Thought about it for 2 years. Angelus, I think it was thank you. Angelus, my friend Barb thinks it was I'm sorry. Angelus, my hip doctor. Angelus, who I told this whole story to once for some reason. Angelus, thinks it was tomorrow. Angelus, I got on the bus at 1:41. Angelus, I sat in the back. And I want to tell you that I was strategizing. Angelus, that I was already 3 moves ahead. Angelus, I wasn't. Put my forehead against that cold window and I cried the entire way to Alta Vista. Angelus, quietly with my scarf over my mouth so the girl across the aisle wouldn't notice. Angelus, and by the time I got off at my stop I had exactly one thought in my head. Angelus, and it wasn't a plan. Angelus, it was $40. Angelus, $40 a week. Angelus, $2,080 a year. Angelus, out of 94,000. I got in my kitchen and I didn't take my coat off. Angelus, I got a pen. Angelus, I got the back of a hydro bill. And I started doing math on my kitchen table at 2:05 in the afternoon like a crazy person. Angelus, and the number I kept coming back to was this. Angelus, in 22 months. Angelus, my son had earned somewhere north of $170,000. Angelus, and he had $1.40 in his hand. Angelus, where was it? Angelus, that's not a feeling. Angelus, that's a question with an answer. Angelus, I called him that night at 9. Angelus, straight to voicemail. Called him the next morning at 6:15. Angelus, because he's always up at 6:15. Angelus, and it rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Angelus, I texted him. Angelus, just checking in. Angelus, no pressure. Angelus, love you. Angelus, nothing. Angelus, I texted him the next day. Angelus, thinking about you. Angelus, nothing. Angelus, and on the 3rd day, Angelus, at 11 at night. Angelus, my phone buzzed and it was him and it said, Angelus, Mom, I can't do this. Angelus, please stop. Angelus, I read that message maybe 40 times. And then I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. Angelus, harder than burying my husband. Angelus, harder than raising a boy alone on a school board salary. Angelus, I stopped. Angelus, I didn't text him. Angelus, not the next day. Angelus, not the day after. Angelus, I let 9 days go by without contacting my only child. Angelus, and every single hour of it felt like standing in a doorway watching a house burn down and doing nothing. Angelus, because Denise taught me. Angelus, every time somebody pushed. Angelus, she dug in. Angelus, every time somebody got angry. Angelus, she defended him. Angelus, the pushing was the fuel. Angelus, so I stopped pushing. Angelus, and on day 9, Angelus, at 6:40 in the morning, Angelus, my phone rang. Angelus, Mom. Angelus, I'm here. Angelus, can you talk? Angelus, his voice was wrong. Angelus, flat and fast at the same time. Angelus, where are you? Bus stop. I've got 7 minutes. Okay. I need to ask you something and I need you to not react. Okay. Do you still have my birth certificate? I sat down on the edge of my bed. What? My birth certificate. The long form. You always kept it in the blue folder thing. In the filing cabinet. Nathan, why do you need your birth certificate? Do you have it or not? I have it. He breathed out. I have never heard a man breathe out like that. Like he'd been holding it for a week. Okay, he said. Okay. Good. Okay. Nathan, why? Because I don't have anything. Mom, and his voice cracked wide open. Right there at a bus stop at 6:40 in the morning. I went looking. I waited till she went to yoga and I went through the whole house. My passport's gone. My birth certificate's gone. My SIN card. There's a file box in the closet in the spare room and it's got a lock on it. Mom, a little padlock. And I stood there and I thought I own this house. I pay for this house. And there's a box in my house I can't open. I gripped the edge of the mattress so hard my hand went numb. Did you ask her about it? Yeah. What did she say? She said it's for safekeeping. She said I lose things. Do you lose things? Long pause. I lost my keys once, he said. In 2019. And then he laughed. And I laughed. God help us both. We laughed. And it was the first honest sound either of us had made in 9 days. Listen to me. Listen. That box does not matter. It's got everything in it. It's got copies. Honey, that's all it is. It's copies of things. The originals don't live in your house. They never did. Your birth certificate lives with the province of Ontario. Your SIN lives with the federal government. Your passport. They'll issue you another one. That box is a prop. Silence. Say that again, he said. It's a prop. It's a prop. She's been keeping you scared of a box, Nathan. That's all. There's nothing in there she can hurt you with. And my son said, very quietly, there's the deed. The deed to the house is at the land registry. There's a copy. Nathan, the original is at the land registry office, and any human being with $40 and a photo ID can walk in and pull it. Including you. Especially you. The bus was coming. I could hear it. He said, Mom, I've got to go. Nathan, I've got to go. She checks the app. What app? And he hung up. What app? I sat on the edge of my bed at 6:47 in the morning with the phone still against my ear, and I said it out loud to my empty bedroom. What app? I'm 64. I want to be honest with you about my limitations. I can do a spreadsheet. I can find anything in a filing system. But I did not know what he meant. And I sat there for a long minute feeling every one of my years. And then I did what any woman my age does when she's in over her head. I called my granddaughter. Well, not my granddaughter. Nathan doesn't have children. My niece's girl, Chloe, 26, works in something with computers I have never once been able to explain to anybody. And I said, Chloe, honey, if somebody says their wife checks the app to see where they are, what does that mean? And Chloe, who is the most cheerful person alive, went completely silent for 4 seconds. Then she said, Aunt Maggie, who are we talking about? Nobody. Aunt Maggie. It's a friend. Is it Nathan? I didn't say anything. Oh, no. And that's how I found out that there are 17 different ways to know where a person is at all times. And most of them are free. And most of them are on by default. And my son had been carrying one in his front pocket for 2 years without knowing what it was. Chloe said something that night that reorganized my entire understanding of the situation. She said, Aunt Maggie, don't have him turn it off. Why not? Angelus, because the second he turns it off, Angelus, she knows. Right now she thinks she's got him. That's the only reason he's got room to move at all. Angelus, I sat with that for about 10 seconds. Angelus, and then I said, Chloe. Angelus, if she can see where he is. Angelus, yeah. Then she saw him at the Rideau Center for 55 minutes. Angelus, silence on the line. Angelus, Chloe. Angelus, yeah, she said. Angelus, yeah, she did. Angelus, which meant Alyssa had known. Angelus, she'd known when she hugged me. She'd known when she said, did you two have a nice visit? She'd known when Nathan said 2 minutes and she smiled and let it go. Angelus, she let him lie. Stood there and let my son lie to her face, and she didn't correct him, Angelus, and I could not for the life of me figure out why, Angelus, and it took me 11 days to understand. Angelus, she let him lie because the lie was useful. Angelus, because now she had it. Angelus, now, whenever she needed it, Angelus, she could pull it out. You lied to me about your mother, and he'd be apologizing at midnight for something that happened in October. Angelus, she wasn't collecting money. Angelus, she was collecting debts. That's when I stopped being sad and started being something else. Angelus, something colder. Something I'd never been in my whole life, Angelus, and I'm not going to pretend to you that it was noble, Angelus, because it wasn't. Angelus, it was ugly and it was hot and it lived right under my breastbone, Angelus. And at 2 in the morning on the 11th day I got out of bed and I went to my filing cabinet in my slippers, Angelus, and I pulled out a legal pad, Angelus, and at the top of the first page I wrote 3 words. Angelus, what do we know? Angelus, not what do we feel. Angelus, not what do we suspect. What do we know? And underneath that I wrote everything I had, Angelus, and it was pathetic. Angelus, it was 6 lines. Angelus, he gets $40 a week. Angelus, he doesn't have online banking access. Angelus, his wife drives his truck. Angelus, her brother lives in his house. There's a locked box. Angelus, he said he's not happy. Angelus, 6 lines. Angelus, that's not a case. That's a rumor. So underneath that I wrote a second heading. Angelus, what can be proven by a stranger? Angelus, and that changed everything. Because I'd been thinking like a mother, Angelus, and a mother is the worst possible person to run this. Angelus, a mother is biased. Angelus, a mother is emotional. A mother is exactly what Alyssa would want across the table, Angelus, because Alyssa could take a mother apart in 10 minutes and everybody in the room would end up feeling sorry for her. But a document doesn't have a face, Angelus, so I wrote down what a stranger could go get. Pay stubs from the employer, Angelus, T4 slips from the government, the mortgage from the land registry, the vehicle registration from Service Ontario, Angelus, the insurance policy from the insurer, bank statements from the bank because a bank does not care whose feelings are hurt, Angelus. A bank cares whose name is on the account, Angelus. And if my son's name was on that account, then my son could walk in and ask for 2 years of statements, and there was not one thing on God's green earth that Alyssa Bennett could do about it. Angelus, I finished at 4:15 in the morning. Angelus, 12 items. Angelus, numbered. And then I did the thing that I think saved my son's life, Angelus, and it wasn't dramatic, Angelus, and it wasn't brave. Angelus, I put it in a folder, Angelus, a plain manila folder, Angelus, and on the tab I wrote, Angelus, in pencil, Angelus, Church Bazaar, Angelus, because I knew that at some point, Angelus, that folder was going to have to live somewhere, Angelus, and it was going to have to live somewhere she'd never look, Angelus, and I'd been married for 19 years, and I knew a thing about hiding presents. Angelus, he called me on the 13th day. Angelus, 6:40 in the morning. Angelus, bus stop. Angelus, 7 minutes. I need to tell you something, and you're going to be mad. Angelus, I'm not going to be mad. Angelus, I told her. Everything in my body stopped. Angelus, you told her what? Angelus, that we talked. Angelus, at the mall. Angelus, that it wasn't 2 minutes. Angelus, Nathan. Angelus, I couldn't do it. Angelus, Mom, I couldn't sit there for 2 weeks with it. Couldn't she'd look at me and I'd think, Angelus, she knows, Angelus, and I'd feel like garbage and I couldn't. Angelus, what did she say? Angelus, she said thank you for being honest. Angelus, I closed my eyes. Angelus, and then what? What do you mean? Angelus, and then what? Angelus, Nathan, and then what happened? Angelus, silence. Angelus, Nathan. Angelus, she cried, he said. Angelus, she cried. for like an hour. She said she felt like she was losing me. She said she's been trying so hard, and she's terrified I'm going to leave like her dad left. And she said, I know I'm difficult about money. I know that. It's because of how I grew up. I've never had anything. And I get scared. And I'm sorry. And I sat on the edge of my bed and I felt the whole thing sliding sideways. And what did you say? I asked. What was I supposed to say? She's crying, Mom. She's on the bathroom floor. I'm the one who lied. I'm the bad guy in this. So I said it's fine. I said we'll figure it out. I said I'm not going anywhere. Nathan. And then she said something. He stopped. And that's the reason I'm calling you. What did she say? I'll give you access to the accounts. I didn't say anything. She said, I'll add you tonight. If it's that important to you. I'll do it tonight. I don't want you to feel like I'm hiding anything. I would never hide anything from you. Still I didn't say anything. Mom, are you there? I'm here. Well. Did she do it? Pause. Not yet. When did she say this? 9 days ago. And there it was. 9 days. Nathan, I said. Has she brought it up since? No. Have you? I asked once. What did she say? She said she'd do it this weekend. And then Derek's thing happened with his car, and it was a whole thing. And Nathan, listen to me. This is the most important thing I'm ever going to say to you, and you've got 4 minutes, so listen. She's not going to do it. She said. She's never going to do it. Not this weekend. Not next weekend. She'll say it every time you push, and she'll cry every time you push, and she will never do it, because the promise is the point. Promise is what she's paying you with. She doesn't have to give you the accounts. She just has to keep you waiting for them. He didn't say anything. That's not money, honey. That's a leash. That's my wife you're talking about. Yes, I said. It is. The bus came. He said, I have to go. Nathan. I have to go. And he hung up on me for the second time in 2 weeks. And I lay back on my bed in the dark and I thought, well, that's that. I pushed. I did the exact thing I told myself I would never do. I made him defend her. And now I'll get a text tonight saying, Mom, I can't do this. Please stop. And this time he'll mean it forever. At 7:02. My phone buzzed. It said, Kanata site. Lunch is 12 to 12:30. There's a Tim's at the corner of Terry Fox and Hazel Dean. I can't be seen with you. And then 30 seconds later. Bring the birth certificate. I got there at 11:40. I sat in the back. I bought a tea I didn't drink. Came in at 4 minutes after 12 in his work boots and his vest. And he didn't sit across from me. He sat beside me. Facing the wall. And he said, without looking at me. Don't hug me. Okay. I mean it. If somebody sees, Nathan, we're in Kanata. Who's going to see? And he said, Derek does the groceries at the Loblaws across the street. And that right there, was the moment I understood that this was not a marriage. I slid the envelope across the table, put it in his vest without looking at it. I have to ask you something. Okay. Are you afraid of them? He laughed. Immediately. No. Nathan. Mom, I'm 6'1", 40 pounds on Derek. Come on. That's not what I asked you. And he stopped laughing. And he looked at the wall for a long time. Then he said, there's stuff in the house. What kind of stuff? There's a thing in the front closet. What thing? It's a bat. Nathan. It's for the nephew's team. Mom, it's a baseball bat. I'm not saying it's. He stopped. Put both hands flat on the table. Been in the front closet for 2 years. And I've never once thought about it. And then last month I came home late, and it was leaning against the wall by the door instead of in the closet, Angelus. And Derek was on the couch watching TV like normal, Angelus. And I said, Angelus, hey, what's the bat doing out, Angelus? And he said, Angelus, no reason, Angelus. I felt every hair on my arm stand up. No reason, Angelus. Yeah, Angelus. And then what, Angelus? And then he put it back, Angelus, that night. Angelus, no, Nathan said. Angelus, it's still there. Angelus, 12:11 in the afternoon. I want to tell you that I said something wise. Didn't. I sat in a Tim Hortons in Canada and stared at a laminated menu and felt something happen inside my chest that I have never felt before or since, Angelus. And the closest I can get to describing it is that I understood, Angelus, for the first time in my 64 years, Angelus, why people do terrible things. Angelus. Then I said, Angelus, Nathan, play me the voicemail. Angelus, not here. Angelus, then when? Angelus, I don't know. Angelus, Nathan, that voicemail is the whole thing. That's not a feeling. Angelus, that's a recording. That's a man's own voice saying a thing on a date and a time, and it's on a server. Angelus, honey, it's not in that locked box. Angelus, it's on a server in a building somewhere, and nobody can take it out of your hand. Angelus, he looked at me. Angelus, and he said, Angelus, it's not on my phone anymore. The floor went out from under me for the second time in 3 weeks. Angelus, what? Angelus, she went through my phone in September. Angelus, she does it sometimes. Angelus, it's not a thing. Angelus, she said it was in the settings. Angelus, she said she was clearing storage. Angelus, Nathan, did she delete it? Angelus, it's not there anymore. Angelus, did you check the deleted folder? Angelus, the what? Angelus, 12:19 in the afternoon. Angelus, 11 minutes left on his lunch. Angelus, I said, give me your phone. Angelus, Mom. Angelus, give me your phone. I don't need your password. Angelus, unlock it and give it to me. Angelus, he unlocked it and slid it across. Angelus, and I want you to understand something. I am a woman who calls her niece to find out what an app is. I had no business touching that phone. But Chloe had spent an hour and 40 minutes on the phone with me 11 days earlier, Angelus, and she had said one sentence that I wrote down on my legal pad and underlined twice. Nothing on a phone ever really deletes right away. There's always a bin. Angelus, it took me 4 minutes. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped it once. Angelus, and then I found it. Recently deleted. Angelus, 29 days remaining. Angelus, 29 days. Angelus, she deleted it on the 23rd of September. Angelus, if Nathan hadn't run into me at that mall. Angelus, if I hadn't grabbed his hand. If I'd gone home and made toast like a reasonable woman. Angelus, 29 days. I turned the phone around and showed him. He didn't move. Angelus, he just looked at the screen. Angelus, and then he looked at me. Angelus, and my son's face did something I had not seen since he was 11 years old at his father's funeral. Angelus, and he said, Angelus, in a voice about 4 sizes too small for his body. Angelus, it's still there. Angelus, it's still there. Didn't. Angelus, she thought she did. Angelus, she didn't. And he put his face in his hands right there in the Tim Hortons at 12:23 in the afternoon, and he said, Angelus, oh my God. Angelus, oh my God, Mom. Angelus, Nathan. Angelus, I thought I was crazy. Angelus, he was crying. My son was crying in his work vest with a hard hat on the table. I thought she told me it never. I asked her about it in October, and she said, what message, Angelus? And I said the one from Derek, Angelus, and she said, Nathan, Angelus, there's no message, Angelus. You're doing the thing again, and I, Angelus, what thing? Angelus, she says I misremember things. Angelus, how often? Angelus, all the time. Angelus, she says I work too much. Angelus, she says I don't sleep. She says my memory's shot from the concussion. Angelus, he looked up. Angelus, Mom, I never had a concussion. Angelus, I said, I know you never had a concussion. I would have been there. Angelus, and he said, Angelus, that's what I thought. She said it so many times I started thinking maybe there was one and you didn't know about it. Angelus, like from work. Angelus, like maybe I got hit and I forgot. There is no fury like a mother listening to somebody hand her son a head injury he never had. Angelus, but I didn't say any of that. Angelus, I said. Angelus, Nathan, we need a copy of that voicemail. How? Angelus, I don't know yet. But not on your phone. Angelus, it cannot live on your phone. Do you understand me? If it lives on your phone, it lives in her house. Then where? I said, give me the phone again. And I did the only thing I could think of, which is that I held my own phone up to his and I played it, and I recorded it, like a woman recording a television. It's terrible quality. There's an espresso machine in the background. There's a man behind us ordering a double-double. You can hear every single word. I'm not going to repeat all of it. But I'll tell you the part I've never been able to get out of my head, and it's not the threatening part. It's not the part about lawyers. It's the beginning. Because Derek doesn't sound angry. That's what nobody understands about this. Derek sounds bored. He sounds like a man leaving a message about a dentist appointment. He says, hey, it's me. Alyssa's asleep. Listen, bud. I know you've been on your phone looking up whatever. Family law. Whatever you're doing. And it's fine. Everybody does that. I'm not mad. But I need you to hear me on something. Your mother's a nice lady. Right, she's a nice lady. She's what? 60. Lives alone in Alta Vista. That little place with the porch. Nice lady. And I'd hate for her to get pulled into a bunch of stuff at her age. That's all I'm saying. She doesn't need the stress. So let's keep this in the house. Okay, that's all. Anyway. It's late. Go to sleep. And then a pause. And then, right at the end, quieter. Don't call anybody. Click. 14 seconds. 14 seconds is all it takes. He knew my street. He knew my house had a porch. He had never once been to my house. Nathan said. Mom, say something. I said, what's the date on it? What? The date. Nathan. What's the date and timestamp on it? He looked. August 11th. 11:52 at night. And I wrote it on my hand, in pen, at 12:31 in the afternoon, in a Tim Hortons in Canada, Aug 11, 11:52 p.m., because that's not a feeling, that's a record. He was 4 minutes late back to the site. He said his foreman didn't even notice. I drove home doing 80 and a 60 and I did not care. And at 4 o'clock that afternoon I called a lawyer. I'm going to be honest about this part because I think people skip it in these stories, and it's the part that actually matters. I didn't know a lawyer. I'd used a lawyer once, in 1997, to buy my house, and he was dead. I sat at my kitchen table with a phone book, an actual phone book, I keep one, laugh all you want, and I made 9 calls. 6 of them wanted a retainer of $5,000. One of them wanted 7. One of them said, and I'm quoting, ma'am, if he's an adult and he's not asking for help, there's really nothing you can do. And the 9th one was a woman named Priya Raman, who had an office above a dry cleaner on Bank Street, and who let me talk for 11 minutes without interrupting once, which is how I knew. At the end of it she said, Mrs. Collins, can I ask you a question? Yes. Is your son the one who called me? No. Then I can't represent your son. And I said, I know. Do you? Yes, I said. I've been sitting here for 3 weeks figuring out that everything I do for him makes him weaker. I'm not calling you to hire you for him. I'm calling you to find out what he needs to have in his hand on the day he calls you himself. Because when that day comes, he'll have about 10 minutes of courage, and I'm not going to waste it on him not knowing where his pay stubs are. There was a long pause on the line, and Priya Raman said, get a pen. I was on that phone for 51 minutes, and she told me things I want everyone listening to hear, because she said them plainly and nobody ever says them plainly. It doesn't matter whose name is on the account, it matters what the money did. He can request his own bank statements. Any account with his name on it, any branch, with photo ID. They don't have to tell his wife, he asked. Truck's registration is a provincial record. Angelus, if it's in his name, it's his. Angelus, she can't sell it. Angelus, she can't transfer it. He can drive it every day for 100 years, and it doesn't change one thing about who owns it. Angelus, she said, the refinance, go get the parcel register. Angelus, $40. Angelus, anybody can pull it. Nothing he signs is binding if he was under duress. Angelus, but duress is very hard to prove. Angelus, so let's not build on that. And then she said the sentence that I wrote in capital letters and taped inside my kitchen cupboard. Angelus, where it still is today. Angelus, Mrs. Angelus Collins, do not tell him what to do. Angelus, tell him what's true. Angelus, people don't leave when you tell them to leave. They leave when they finally see it written down. Angelus, and then she said, Angelus, one more thing. Angelus, yes. Angelus, you said there's a recording. Angelus, yes. You said the brother mentions your address. Angelus, yes. Angelus, and Priya Raman's voice changed. Angelus, it got very careful. Angelus, she said, Mrs. I want you to do something for me tonight. I want you to call the non-emergency police line and I want you to report it. Angelus, I said, it's 14 seconds. He didn't threaten anybody. Angelus, he said I was a nice lady. Angelus, I know what he said. Angelus, they'll laugh at me. Angelus, they might, she said. Angelus, do it anyway. Angelus, do you know why? Angelus, no. Angelus, because right now, Angelus, if something happens, Angelus, you're a 64-year-old woman with a story. Angelus, if you call tonight, Angelus, you're a 64-year-old woman with a file number and a date. And a file number is the difference between somebody believing you and somebody believing you later. Angelus, I called at 6:50 that night. Constable was 25 years old and very kind and very tired, and it took 40 minutes, and at the end of it he said, Angelus, ma'am, I have to be honest with you. Angelus, this doesn't rise to a charge. Angelus, and I said, I know. Angelus, just give me the number. Angelus, and he gave me the number. I wrote it on the manila folder that said Church Bazaar. Angelus, two things happened in November. The first happened on the 4th, Angelus, at 9:20 at night, Angelus, when my phone rang, and it wasn't Nathan. Angelus, it was Alyssa. Angelus, I looked at that screen for 4 rings. Angelus, then I picked up and I said, hello. Angelus, and she said, Angelus, Maggie, hi. Angelus, did I catch you at a bad time? Angelus, not at all. Angelus, I just wanted to check in. Angelus, how's your hip? Angelus, 3 minutes of small talk. Angelus, 3 minutes. Angelus, my hip, the weather. Angelus, whether I'd gotten my flu shot. Angelus, she asked about Barb. Angelus, she remembered Barb's name. Angelus, and then, exactly the way you'd hand somebody a coffee, she said. Angelus, so listen, Angelus, I wanted to run something by you. Angelus, I'm a little worried about Nathan. Angelus, and I said, oh, he's been really off lately. Angelus, really stressed. This is hard to say, he's been forgetting things. Angelus, like a lot. Angelus, and he's been kind of paranoid. Angelus, like he thinks people are going through his stuff. Angelus, I did not say a word. And I know he's been talking to you, she said. Angelus, which is great. Angelus, I love that. Angelus, I want that. Angelus, but Maggie. Angelus, I've got to be honest with you. Angelus, and I'm only saying this because I love him every time he talks to you. Angelus, he gets worse. Angelus, there it was. Angelus, he gets these ideas, she said. And I know you don't mean it. Angelus, but you're his mom. Angelus, and when you get worried, Angelus, he gets worried. Angelus, and then he can't sleep. Angelus, and then he can't function on site. Angelus, and honestly, Angelus, I'm scared he's going to get hurt out there. Angelus, 60 feet up with no sleep. Angelus, that's a good point, I said. Angelus, right. Angelus, that's a very good point, Alyssa. So I was thinking, and just hear me out, maybe just for a little bit, Angelus, like till the new year. Angelus, maybe you two could just, Angelus, cool it just a bit, Angelus, just so he can level out. And I said, and this is the single best thing I have ever said in my life, Angelus, and I'd been rehearsing it for 2 weeks in the shower without knowing it. Angelus, I said, Alyssa, Angelus, that's such a relief. Angelus, I've been so worried and I didn't know who to talk to. Would you mind if I just called you instead, Angelus, every Sunday? Angelus, just to check how he's doing. Angelus, silence. Angelus, 4 full seconds of silence. Angelus, because she couldn't say no. Angelus, do you understand? Angelus, she couldn't say no. She'd just spent 3 minutes telling me she loved him and wanted him to have his family, and was only doing this out of concern. Angelus, if she said no to a weekly phone call from a worried mother, Angelus, the whole thing came apart in her own hands. Angelus, and she said, "Dot sure." Angelus, yeah. Angelus, of course. Angelus, wonderful. Angelus, Sundays at 7. Angelus, sure. Angelus, thank you. Angelus, sweetheart. Angelus, really. Angelus, I feel so much better. Angelus, and I hung up. Angelus, and I sat there in my kitchen. Angelus, and I put my head down on my arm. Angelus, and I shook. Because I'd just bought my son 9 more weeks. Angelus, 9 Sundays. Angelus, 9 calls where I could hear her voice. Angelus, and time stamp it. Angelus, and ask her casually. Angelus, warmly, like an old fool how the account access was coming along. Angelus, how Derek's certificate was going. Whether Nathan had gotten his truck back yet. Angelus, since I'd been meaning to ask about the insurance thing. Angelus, my friend Barb's son had the same setup, and apparently it doesn't actually save you anything. Angelus, isn't that funny? Angelus, 9 Sundays of a nice, Angelus, dumb, harmless old lady asking questions on the record. The second thing happened on the 19th of November. Angelus, at 2:15 in the morning. Angelus, my phone rang. Angelus, and when your phone rings at 2:15 in the morning, Angelus, you already know. Angelus, I picked it up and I said, "Nathan." Angelus, and there was breathing. Angelus, and then my son said, Angelus, in a voice I had never heard in 38 years. Angelus, "Mom." Angelus, "I'm in the truck." Angelus, "What?" Angelus, "I'm in the truck." Angelus, "I'm parked at the Petro-Canada on Hunt Club. I've got my work bag and I've got the folder and I don't know what to do next." Angelus, I was already out of bed. "Nathan, what happened?" Angelus, "He wasn't drunk this time," he said. Angelus, "Who wasn't?" And then my son started laughing. Angelus, and it was the worst sound I have ever heard a human being make. Angelus, "He wasn't drunk." Angelus, "That's the thing, Mom." Angelus, "He wasn't drunk. He was just standing in the kitchen." Angelus, and she was standing behind him. Angelus, and I said one sentence. Angelus, I said one sentence, and I want you to know it wasn't even a big one. "What did you say?" Angelus, I said, "I called the bank today." Angelus, silence on the line. Angelus, I could hear a truck engine idling. Angelus, I could hear my son breathing like a man who'd run up a hill. Angelus, and then what? I said. Angelus, and then he moved. Angelus, and then he moved. Angelus, Nathan. Angelus, what do you mean he moved? Angelus, he came around the counter. Angelus, did he touch you? Angelus, no. Nathan, did he put his hands on you? Angelus, no. Mom, that's what I'm telling you. Angelus, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Angelus, he didn't touch me. He didn't say anything. He just came around the counter and stood in the doorway. Angelus, which doorway? Angelus, the one to the hall. Angelus, the one to the stairs. Angelus, the one to the front door. I was standing in my kitchen in my nightgown at 2:17 in the morning with the phone in one hand and my car keys already in the other. Angelus, and I heard myself say, Angelus, in a voice so calm it frightened me. Angelus, how long did he stand there? Angelus, I don't know. Angelus, Nathan. Angelus, I don't know. Angelus, a minute, 2 minutes. Angelus, he just stood there with his arms down and he looked at me and he didn't say one word. Angelus, and I said, Angelus, Derek, I'm going out for a drive. Angelus, and he said, Angelus, it's midnight. Angelus, and I said, Angelus, I know what time it is. Angelus, and he said, Angelus, where would you even go? Angelus, that's what he said. Angelus, that's what he said. Where would you even go? Angelus, not a question. Angelus, he didn't say it like a question. Angelus, and Alyssa. Angelus, she was behind him. Angelus, doing what? Angelus, nothing. He laughed that laugh again. Angelus, the one that made my skin crawl. That's the thing. Angelus, she wasn't doing anything. She was leaning on the counter with her arms crossed. Angelus, like she was waiting for a kettle. Angelus, I said, how did you get out? Angelus, he moved. Angelus, he just moved. Angelus, after a while. He stepped aside and he did this thing with his hand. Angelus, like a doorman. Angelus, like after you. Angelus, and he smiled at me. Angelus, and he said, Angelus, drive safe, bud. Angelus, I closed my eyes. And I walked out. Nathan said, and I got in the truck, and I drove 12 minutes, and I pulled into a gas station, and I've been sitting here for an hour and 40 minutes. And Mom, I keep thinking nothing happened. Right, nothing actually happened. He didn't touch me. He didn't threaten me. He said drive safe. If I told anybody this story, they'd say, so what? Your brother-in-law stood in a doorway. And I said, Nathan, why are you shaking? Silence. You're shaking, I said. I can hear it in your voice. You've been sitting in a parking lot for an hour and 40 minutes, and you can't make your hands stop. So don't tell me nothing happened. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, can I come to your house? And I want you to understand that there is not one cell in my body that wanted to say what I said next. I have wanted my son under my roof since the day he moved out at 22. I have kept his room. I have kept his hockey trophies on a shelf like a lunatic. I have imagined, more times than I'll admit. Him sitting at my kitchen table eating something I made. And I said, no. What? No, honey. Not my house. Mom, where else am I supposed to? August 11th, I said. 11:52 at night. And on the other end of the line, 12 minutes away, in a gas station parking lot, my son went completely silent, because he knew he'd heard that voicemail more times than I had. Lives alone in Alta Vista, that little place with the porch. Oh, Nathan said. Yeah. Oh, God, I didn't even, I was driving there. I was already driving there. I turned around at Walkley because I didn't want to wake you up. Well then, I said, thank God you're polite. I was in my car at 2:24. I want to tell you I was steady. I stalled it twice in my own driveway. I hadn't driven at night in 4 years, since the cataract surgery, and every set of headlights coming the other way went off in my face like a flashbulb, and I drove 20 kilometers under the limit the whole way with both hands on the wheel like a student driver. I pulled in at 3:11 in the morning. He was sitting in that truck under the lights with the engine off and his hands in his lap. I got in the passenger side and I closed the door, and neither one of us said anything for about 10 seconds. Then Nathan said, you're in the truck. I am. You've never been in the truck. No. You wanted to be in the truck for 3 years. I did. And my son put both hands over his face and cried like a child. Not the quiet kind. The other kind. The kind where the whole body goes. He cried so hard the truck moved. And I sat there with my hand on his back like he was 7 and had come off his bike. And I did not say one word. Because there was nothing to say, and because I had learned by then that the fastest way to shut my son up was to be helpful. It took 4 minutes. 3:15 he wiped his face with the back of his wrist and said, sorry. Don't. I don't do that. I know you don't. That's the problem. He laughed. Wetly. Real though. And then he said, do you want to know what I actually did today? Yes. I called the bank. I know. You told me. That's the sentence that started all of it. No, Nathan said. You don't get it. I mean, I want to tell you what happened when I called the bank. And that's when the floor went out from under me for the 3rd time. He done it at 11:05 in the morning, from a portable toilet. I want that detail on the record because it's the truest thing in this whole story. My son, a construction supervisor, a man who runs a crew of 19, locked himself in a portable toilet on job site in Kanata because it was the only place in the province of Ontario where nobody could see his face while he made a phone call. He gave them his name. He gave them his date of birth. He gave them his address. I'd like to request statements on my accounts. And the woman said, which accounts, sir? And Nathan said, what do you mean? Which one? Sir, I'm showing 4. 4. He said 4. Angelus, he said 4, Mom. Angelus, what are they? Angelus, that's what I said. Angelus, I said, can you tell me what they are? Angelus, and she said, Angelus, sir, I can only discuss accounts where you're a named party. Angelus, and I said, Angelus, so which ones am I named on? Angelus, and she said, Angelus, all 4. I sat in that truck at 3:19 in the morning, and I felt something go very cold and very quiet in my chest. Angelus, Nathan, what are the 4? Angelus, checkwing. Angelus, savings. Angelus, a joint checkwing. Angelus, he stopped. Angelus, and Angelus, and a home equity line of credit. Angelus, there it is. Angelus, say it again. Angelus, a HELOC, Mom. Angelus, against the house. Angelus, when was it opened? Angelus, March. Angelus, last March. Angelus, the refinance. Angelus, the refinance. Angelus, how much is the limit? He didn't say anything. Angelus, Nathan, how much is the limit? Angelus, 140. Angelus, thousand. Angelus, $140,000. I put my hand flat on the dashboard of my son's truck because I genuinely thought I might tip over. Angelus, how much is drawn? Angelus, and Nathan said, Angelus, in the flattest voice you have ever heard. Angelus, 118,000. Angelus, $460. Angelus, 3:21 in the morning. Angelus, I said, Nathan. Angelus, did you know? Angelus, no. Angelus, did you sign for it? Angelus, I signed something. Angelus, Mom, I signed 40 pages. Angelus, I told you. Angelus, the lady was talking and everybody wanted. Angelus, Nathan, yes. Angelus, obviously I signed it. Angelus, my name's on it. Angelus, that's what she said. Angelus, she said, you're a named party. Angelus, you don't get to be a named party by accident. Angelus, where did it go? Angelus, I don't know. $118,000, Nathan. Angelus, where does that go? Angelus, I don't know. Angelus, and he hit the steering wheel with the heel of his hand. Angelus, once hard. Angelus, and then immediately said, sorry. Angelus, sorry. Angelus, don't apologize to me for that. Angelus, I asked her. Angelus, the bank lady. Angelus, I said, where did the money go? And she said, Angelus, sir, I can send you the statements. Angelus, they'll show the transfers. Angelus, I can mail them to the address on file. Angelus, and I said, Angelus, don't you dare. Angelus, what? Angelus, the address on file is your house, Nathan. And my son looked at me across the dark cab of that truck, and I watched it land on him. Angelus, I told her to mail them to your house, he said. You did. Angelus, I did it before I hung up. Angelus, I didn't even think about it. Angelus, it just came out of my mouth. Angelus, 3:24 in the morning. Angelus, and for the first time in 3 months. Angelus, I laughed. Angelus, Nathan Collins. Angelus, what? You did that on your own. Angelus, it's not a big deal. Angelus, it's the biggest deal there is. And then his phone lit up in the cup holder. Angelus, and we both looked at it. Angelus, and it said Alyssa. Angelus, and underneath it said 22 missed calls. Angelus, 22. Angelus, I said, don't answer it. Angelus, Mom. Angelus, don't answer it. Angelus, she's going to think whatever she was always going to think. Angelus, Nathan, listen to me. Angelus, whatever you say right now. Angelus, at 3 in the morning. Angelus, exhausted. Angelus, is a thing you'll be defending for 5 years. Nothing good has ever been said at 3 in the morning. Angelus, nothing in the history of the world. Angelus, he put the phone face down. Angelus, it buzzed. Angelus, he turned it over. Angelus, and there it was. Angelus, on the screen. Angelus, and I read it upside down. Angelus, where are you? Angelus, I'm not mad. Angelus, just tell me where you are. Angelus, then 11 seconds later. Angelus, babe, please. Angelus, then, you're scaring me. Angelus, then. Angelus, I can't do this again. And then, at 3:31 in the morning. Angelus, if you don't answer, I'm calling the police. I think something's wrong with you. Angelus, and Nathan said, Angelus, see, she's worried. Angelus, she's actually worried. Mom, look at it. Angelus, Nathan, she thinks something's wrong. She's not being. Angelus, Nathan read the last one again. Angelus, he read it. Angelus, read it out loud. Angelus, if you don't answer, I'm calling the police. Angelus, I think something's wrong with you. Angelus, Nathan, I said. Angelus, with you. Angelus, he stopped. Angelus, not something's wrong. Angelus, something's wrong with you. Honey, do you hear the difference? Angelus. She's not worried you're hurt. Telling you she's about to make a phone call. Angelus. And she's telling you what she's going to say in it. Angelus. He stared at that screen. Angelus. And then he said, Angelus, very quietly. Angelus. She's done that before. Angelus. Done what? Angelus. Said something's wrong with me. Angelus. To other people. Angelus. To who? Angelus. Her friend Deb. Angelus. My foreman. Your foreman? Angelus. She called Jerry in August. She said she was worried about my mental health, and could he keep an eye on me up on the steel? Angelus. 3:34 in the morning. Angelus. I said, Nathan. Angelus. How long ago did you know that? Angelus. August. Angelus. And you never told me. Angelus. And my son said. Angelus. Because I thought maybe she was right. Angelus. At 4:02. Angelus. A cruiser pulled in behind us. I want you to know exactly what happened in that truck in the 4 seconds between the lights hitting the mirror and the officer knocking on the glass. Angelus. Because it explains more about what Alyssa Bennett had done to my son than anything else in this whole story. Angelus. Oh, God. Put his hands on the steering wheel. Angelus. At 10:02. Angelus. Palms up. Angelus. Fingers spread. Angelus. Nobody told him to. Nobody had knocked yet. Angelus. My son in his own vehicle. Angelus. In a legal parking spot. Angelus. With no alcohol in his body. Angelus. Put his hands up on the wheel like a man who had already decided he was guilty of something. Angelus. I said, Nathan. Angelus. Put your hands down. Angelus. Mom. Angelus. Put your hands down. Angelus. You haven't done anything. Angelus. The officer came to the window. Angelus. He was maybe 30. He had a light and he ran it over the both of us, and I could see him doing the arithmetic big man. Angelus. Older woman. Angelus. 4 in the morning. Angelus. Gas station, and I watched his shoulders come down about an inch when he clocked me. Angelus. He said, Evening, folks. Angelus. This your vehicle, sir? Angelus. And Nathan said, Yes. Angelus. And the officer said, Angelus, can I see your license and registration? Angelus. And here's what happened next. Here's the moment. 3 months of a woman in slippers at 4 in the morning writing numbered lists on a legal pad. Angelus. And it all came down to this. Nathan reached across me and opened the glove box. And in the glove box was a plain white envelope from Service Ontario. Angelus. Postmarked 11 days earlier. Angelus. That I had told him to order and pay for with his own $40. Angelus. And inside it was a vehicle portion permit with one name on it. His. Angelus. He handed it out the window. Angelus. The officer took it. He looked at it. Angelus. He looked at Nathan. He looked at it again. Angelus. And he said, Angelus, Sir, we got a call that this vehicle was taken without consent. Angelus. And Nathan didn't say a word. Angelus. So I leaned across and I said, Angelus, Officer, my name is Margaret Collins. Angelus. That is my son. Angelus. That is his truck. His name is the only name on that permit, and it has been for 4 years. Would you like to check the plate against the VIN? Angelus. It's on the door frame. Angelus. He said, Ma'am. Angelus. I said, I'd like you to check it. Angelus. And he did. He walked around and he opened the door and he ran his light on the sticker and he came back and he handed the permit through the window and he said, Angelus, everything's in order. Angelus. And I said, Angelus, Officer, could I have the incident number, please? Angelus. He stopped. Angelus. Ma'am. Angelus. The incident number. Angelus. For tonight's call. The one that says somebody reported this truck stolen at. I looked at my watch sometime in the last 40 minutes. Angelus. I'd like the number, please. Angelus. He looked at me for a second. Angelus. And then something changed in his face. Angelus. He'd figured out what he was standing in. Angelus. You could see it happen. Angelus. He said, Ma'am. Angelus. Are you two all right? Angelus. And Nathan said, Angelus, we're fine. Angelus. And I said, no. Nathan turned his head so fast I heard his neck. Officer. Angelus. We're not fine. My son left his house tonight and his brother-in-law stood in the doorway. Angelus. Nobody touched anybody. Angelus. Nobody threatened anybody. There's nothing for you to write down, and I know that. Angelus. I'm not asking you to do a thing. Angelus. I'm just asking for the number. The officer stood there in the cold for about 5 seconds. Then he took out his book and he wrote it on a page and he tore it out and he handed it to me and he said, Angelus, ma'am, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. Angelus. And then I'm going to go. Angelus. All right. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Angelus. And then he said to Nathan, "Sir," Angelus, "it's your truck." Angelus, "Anybody says otherwise." Angelus, "You show him that paper." Angelus, and he left. Angelus, 4:19 in the morning. Angelus, I sat there with that scrap of paper in my hand. Angelus, and Nathan sat there with both hands over his mouth. Angelus, and after a long time he said, Angelus, through his fingers. Angelus, she called the police on me. Angelus, yes. Angelus, she told them I stole my own truck. Angelus, yes. Angelus, Mom, she knows it's my truck. Better than anybody. She's the one who set up the insurance thing, she knows. Angelus, and I said, Nathan, she wasn't trying to get the truck back. Angelus, he looked at me. She was trying to get you in the system, I said. Angelus, she wanted a report. Angelus, she wanted a call. She wanted a night where the police came out to you at 4 in the morning at a gas station, Angelus, so that in 6 months, Angelus, when somebody asks, Angelus, she can say, Angelus, officers have been out. Angelus, ask them. Angelus, and my son said, Angelus, that's insane. Angelus, and I said, yes. Angelus, and he said, Angelus, that's actually insane, Mom. Nobody thinks like that. Angelus, and I said, Angelus, somebody does. I got him a room at a Comfort Inn at $450. Angelus, I paid for it on my Visa. Angelus, $94. Fought me on it for 6 minutes in the lobby with the night clerk, pretending not to listen. Angelus, and I finally said, Angelus, Nathan, I have 31 years of pension and a paid-off house and no vices. Angelus, will you please let me buy you one night's sleep? Angelus, and he stopped. Angelus, he said, at the elevator, Mom. Angelus, what do I do tomorrow? Angelus, and I said, Angelus, you sleep. Angelus, that's not a plan. Nathan, you have been awake for 23 hours and you have made the 4 best decisions of your adult life in the last 18. Angelus, you called the bank. Angelus, you ordered your registration. Angelus, you got in the truck. Angelus, and you had them mail the statements to me. Angelus, that's not nothing. That's a case. Angelus, he said, it doesn't feel like a case. Angelus, and I said, Angelus, it never does. Angelus, that's why people stay. Angelus, at 9:06 the next morning. Angelus, I called the hotel. Angelus, they said the room was vacant. Angelus, I said, that's not possible. Angelus, I paid through 11. Angelus, and the girl said, Angelus, he checked out at 7:40, ma'am. I stood in my kitchen with the phone in my hand and I already knew. Angelus, I called his cell. Angelus, voicemail. Angelus, I called again. Angelus, voicemail. Angelus, at 9:51. Angelus, I got a text. Angelus, I have to get my tools. Angelus, that's it. Angelus, 6 words. Angelus, and then 4 minutes later. Angelus, Mom, please don't call me today. Angelus, I sat down on my kitchen floor. Angelus, I'm 64 years old. Angelus, I have a bad hip. Angelus, I sat down on the linoleum with my back against the dishwasher. Angelus, in my housecoat. Angelus, at 9:55 in the morning. Angelus, and I did not get up for 40 minutes. Because I finally understood the thing that every single person who has ever watched this from the outside gets wrong. Angelus, he went back. Angelus, of course he went back. Everybody watching right now is thinking, Angelus, why would he go back? Angelus, and I'm telling you, Angelus, he went back because his tools were there. Angelus, $11,000 of tools. Angelus, a 21-year career in a job box in a garage. He went back because you can't be a construction supervisor without your tools, Angelus, and if he lost his job, he'd have nothing, Angelus. And if he had nothing, then everything she'd ever said about him was true. Angelus, he didn't go back for her. He went back because leaving costs money, Angelus, and she had all of it. Angelus, that's the whole trick. That's the entire trick, and it's so stupid and so simple that nobody believes it until it happens to their own child. Angelus, Barb came over at 11. Angelus, I didn't call her. Angelus, she just came. Angelus, because Barb has known me since 1000. Angelus, 986, and she says my voice does a thing on the phone. Angelus, she sat on my kitchen floor with me. Angelus, 67 years old. Angelus, both of us. Angelus, on the linoleum like a couple of teenagers. Angelus, and she said, Angelus, Maggie, can I say the thing you don't want to hear? Angelus, no. Angelus, he's 38. Angelus, Barb. Angelus, he's 38 and he's an adult and at some point. Angelus, and I said, Angelus, Barb, if you finish that sentence I will never speak to you again as long as I live. Angelus, and she stopped. And after a minute she said, okay, then what do we do? We. I have never loved a person more in my life than I loved Barb Whitmore at 11:15 in the morning on November 20th. Sunday came. I'm going to tell you about Sunday, because Sunday is when it turned, and it didn't turn the way I expected, and it didn't turn because of anything brave. 7 o'clock, my weekly call. The one I'd tricked her into agreeing to on the 4th of November, the one I'd been so proud of, the one I thought was my clever little bit of chess. Up on the second ring and she said, Maggie, hi. Bright. Warm. Like a woman with nothing on her mind. And I said, hi, sweetheart. How's our boy? And Alyssa Bennett said, oh, Maggie. It's been a really hard week. And I said, oh no. And she said, I didn't want to tell you. But I think I have to. Here's what I want everybody listening to understand. I had a pen in my hand. I had my legal pad. It was 7:01 on a Sunday, and I had already written the date at the top of the page, because I'd been doing this for 3 weeks, and I am, at the bottom of everything, a woman who takes minutes. She talked for 26 minutes, and in those 26 minutes she told me, in the kindest voice you have ever heard, the following things. That Nathan had disappeared in the middle of the night without a word, and she'd been so frightened she'd called the police. That when he came back he was not himself. That he'd been saying things about the bank, and about paperwork, and about her brother, and that some of it didn't line up. She was worried about early cognitive stuff, because his dad died young, didn't he, and wasn't there something with his dad, that she'd talked to someone. And I said, and my hand was writing the whole time, and my voice was as soft as butter. I said, talk to someone, a professional. Oh, that's good, that's so good, Alyssa. Who? Pause. Just someone. Through work. Well, that's wonderful. Does Nathan know? Longer pause. Not yet. I don't want to upset him. And I said, you're such a good wife. And she said, I'm really trying. 7:22 in the evening. And then she said the thing that ended the phase of my life where I still had one foot in the idea that this was a misunderstanding. She said, Maggie, can I ask you something kind of personal? Of course. Do you have a power of attorney set up, for yourself, I mean? At your age you really should. I said, I do actually. Oh, good. Who's on it? And I said, Nathan. And Alyssa Bennett said, okay. Just you know, at some point, if his memory stuff gets worse, you might want to think about a backup, just so someone's there. Silence. And she laughed and said, sorry, that's so morbid. I just think about that stuff. I said, that's very thoughtful of you. And I hung up at 7:29 and I wrote one sentence at the bottom of that page and I underlined it 3 times. She's coming for me next. Priya Raman called me back on Tuesday at 2:40 in the afternoon. I'd left her a message that was 4 minutes long and mostly not words. She let me read her the whole page. All 26 minutes of it. Every line. When I finished, she was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, Collins, I need to adjust something I told you. Okay. I told you this was about money. Yes. It's not. And I sat down. $118,000 is a lot of money. But you don't call the police on a man for a truck you know is his. You don't call his foreman. You don't tell his mother he's got a memory problem. Those aren't things you do to get money. Those are things you do to build a record. A record of what? Of a man who can't be trusted to speak for himself. I said, why? And Priya said, Mrs. Collins, when this ends, and it's going to end, they always end, there's going to be a room. And in that room, Everything is going to come down to who the room believes. She has spent 2 years making deposit. Your son has spent 2 years thinking he was just tired. Angelus, I said, so what do we have? Angelus, and she said, Angelus, you have a bank. Angelus, what? Angelus, Mrs. Angelus Collins, listen to me. Angelus, she can tell a foreman anything. Angelus, she can tell the police anything. Angelus, she can tell you anything. Angelus, she cannot tell a bank anything. Angelus, a bank writes down the date. Angelus, the amount. Angelus, and the destination. Angelus, every single time. Angelus, forever, and it does not care about anybody's feelings. When those statements arrive at your house, Angelus, you're not going to have a story anymore. You're going to have $118,000 with somewhere it went. Angelus, and then she said, Angelus, one more thing. Did you pull the parcel register? Angelus, not yet. Angelus, pull it today. Angelus, I pulled it on Wednesday. Angelus, $40. Angelus, I paid with a debit card at a counter. Angelus, and a young man printed it out and handed it to me in a folder like it was nothing. Angelus, like it was a receipt for a muffin. Angelus, I read it in my car in the parking lot. Angelus, the HELOC was there. Angelus, March 14th. $140,000 limit. Angelus, registered against the property. Angelus, both names. Angelus, but that's not what stopped me. What stopped me was that I'm an administrator. I've been reading forms since 1000. Angelus, 983. Angelus, and when you've read forms for 40 years, Angelus, your eye does a thing your brain doesn't ask permission for. Goes to the box nobody looks at. Angelus, and in the box nobody looks at. Angelus, under prior instruments. Angelus, there was a discharged mortgage from 2016. Different property. Angelus, Barhaven. Angelus, 2 names on it. Alyssa Bennett. Angelus, and Marcus Feeney. Angelus, 3:11 in the afternoon. Angelus, I sat in my car in that parking lot and I said out loud, Angelus, to nobody. Angelus, who is Marcus Feeney? Angelus, I want to be very careful here. Angelus, because at that moment I had exactly one fact. Angelus, a name on a discharged mortgage from 10 years ago. Angelus, that's it. Angelus, people have exes. Angelus, people have property. I'd been married before I met Nathan's father for 11 months, Angelus, when I was 20, Angelus, to a man named Ronnie who I have not thought about in 4 decades. Angelus, it means nothing. Angelus, it's paper. Angelus, but here's the thing I couldn't get past. Alyssa Bennett was 34 years old. Angelus, she had told me, Angelus, at her own wedding, Angelus, sitting at the head table with a glass of white wine, Angelus, that Nathan was the first man she'd ever lived with. Angelus, she said it to my face. Angelus, I remember it exactly, Angelus, because I remember thinking it was a sweet thing to tell your mother-in-law. Angelus, and in 2016, Angelus, when she was 24, Angelus, her name was on a mortgage in Barhaven with a man named Marcus Feeney. Angelus, that's not a feeling. Angelus, that's a document. I drove home and I did the only kind of investigation a 64-year-old woman can do, Angelus, which is that I typed a name into a search bar with 2 fingers. There were 11 Marcus Feeneys in Canada. Angelus, 4 in Ontario. Angelus, 2 in Ottawa. One of them was a plumber. And on a plumbing company's website there was a photograph of a crew of 6 men standing in front of a van, Angelus, and the caption named them left to right, Angelus. And the 4th one from the left was a heavy-set man in his 40s with sunglasses on his head, Angelus. And I looked at that photograph for a long time, and then I did something that I'm still not sure was legal or right or sane. Angelus, I called the plumbing company. Angelus, at 4:50 on a Wednesday afternoon. Angelus, and a woman answered and said, Angelus, Feeney and Sons. Angelus, how can I help you? Angelus, and I said, Angelus, I'd like to speak to Marcus, please. Angelus, is this about a service call? Stood in my kitchen and I heard myself say, Angelus, no. Angelus, it's about a house in Barhaven. Angelus, the line went quiet. Angelus, and then there was a click and a shuffle and a door closing somewhere, Angelus, and a man's voice came on, Angelus, and he sounded like a man who'd been holding his breath for 10 years. Angelus, he said, who is this? Angelus, and I said, Angelus, my name is Margaret Collins. Angelus, you don't know me. My son is married to a woman named Alyssa Bennett. Angelus, and Marcus Feeney said, Angelus, ah, Angelus, just that. Angelus, ah. like a man who'd been waiting for the phone to ring since 2016. Angelus. And then he said, Angelus, is he still alive? Angelus, is he still alive? I want you to know what that does to a person. I was standing at my kitchen counter with a pen in my hand and I had to put the pen down, Angelus, because my fingers stopped working. What did you just ask me? Angelus. And he said, Angelus, I'm sorry. Angelus, that came out wrong. I've had 10 years to think about how I'd say that and I still got it wrong. Angelus. Mr. Angelus. Feeney. Angelus. Marcus. Angelus. Marcus. Angelus. My son is alive. Angelus. Okay, he said. Angelus. And he let out a breath. Angelus. Okay. Angelus. Good. Angelus. Why would you ask me that? Angelus. And there was a long pause. Angelus. And I heard a chair scrape. Angelus. And he said, Angelus. Ma'am, how did you get this number? There's a mortgage. Angelus. Barhaven. Angelus. 2016. Angelus. Your name's on it and hers is too. Angelus. You pulled a parcel register. Angelus. I did. Angelus. On purpose. Angelus. On purpose. And Marcus Feeney laughed, Angelus, and it wasn't a happy sound, Angelus. And he said, Angelus, nobody's ever done that, Angelus, in 10 years. Not one person has ever done that. Angelus. 4:54 in the afternoon. Angelus. I said, Marcus. Angelus. I need you to tell me what happened. Angelus. And he said, no. Angelus. What? Angelus. No, ma'am. I'm not doing this over the phone with a woman I've never met who might be her. I'm not. Angelus. I don't know that. Angelus. His voice went hard. Angelus. I don't know one thing about you. You could be her sister. You could be her. Could be sitting next to her right now. I've had somebody call me pretending to be a customer before, and I'm not. Angelus. Marcus, I said. Angelus. August 11th. Angelus. 11:52 at night. Her brother left a voicemail on my son's phone. Angelus. He said my street. Angelus. He said my house has a porch. He has never been to my house. Angelus. Silence. Angelus. Complete silence. Angelus. For 11 seconds. Angelus. I counted them. Angelus. And then Marcus Feeney said, Angelus, very quietly. Angelus. Derek. You know Derek. Angelus. Ma'am, where do you live? Angelus. Alta Vista. Angelus. Is there a Tim Hortons near you? There's a Tim Hortons within 400 feet of every human being in this country. Marcus. Angelus. And he laughed. Angelus. Actually laughed. Angelus. And he said, tomorrow. Angelus. 10 in the morning. Angelus. Pick one. Angelus. Bring somebody with you. Angelus. Why? Angelus. Because, he said. Angelus. You're not going to want to drive home after. Angelus. Barb drove me. Angelus. She sat 2 tables over with a newspaper she wasn't reading. Angelus. 67 years old. Angelus. Doing surveillance like a woman in a movie. Angelus. And I have never in my life been so grateful for another human being. Angelus. He came in at 10:04. Angelus. Big man. Angelus. 50s now. Angelus. Not 40s. He'd shaved his head since that photo on the website. He had a paper cup in one hand and a plastic grocery bag in the other, Angelus, and he sat down across from me and he set the bag on the table and he didn't touch his coffee. You look like somebody's mother. Angelus. I said, I am somebody's mother. Angelus. He said, yeah. Angelus. That's what I mean. Angelus. Okay. Angelus. And then he sat there for a second and he said, Angelus, I'm going to tell you the whole thing. Angelus. And I need you to not talk until I'm done. Angelus. Because if I stop, I'm not going to start again. Angelus. Can you do that? Angelus. I said yes. I met her in 2014. Angelus. She was 22. Angelus. I was 38. Angelus. Same age as my son. Angelus. I want you to hear that. Angelus. She was 34 now, Angelus, and Nathan was 38, Angelus. And 10 years ago she'd been 22, and Marcus Feeney had been 38, Angelus. And I sat there and I felt something click over in my head like a tumbler in a lock. She was the best thing that ever happened to me, he said. Angelus. I want you to understand that part. I'm not sitting here telling you I got tricked by some obvious con. Angelus. She was funny. Angelus. She was kind, ma'am. Angelus. She remembered everything. She remembered my mother's chemo schedule better than I did. Angelus. My guys loved her. Angelus. My own mother loved her. Angelus. My mother said to me on her deathbed, Angelus, Marcus, don't you let that girl go. Turned the cup around on the table. Bought the house in Barhaven in 2016. Angelus. Both names. Angelus, her idea, but she cried when she said it. Angelus, she said she'd never had anything with her name on it. Angelus, she said her dad walked out when she was 9 and she'd never had anything that couldn't be taken. Angelus, I closed my eyes. Angelus, because I had heard that. Angelus, word for word. Nathan had said it to me on a bus stop at 6:40 in the morning. Terrified I'm going to leave like her dad left. Angelus, she's never had anything. Angelus, same word. Angelus, 10 years apart. Angelus, 2 different men. Angelus, it was a script. Angelus, and then Derek moved in. Angelus, Marcus said. Angelus, I opened my eyes. Angelus, say that again. Angelus, Derek moved in. Angelus, 9 months after we bought it. Angelus, he was between things. Angelus, between what things? And Marcus Feeney looked at me and said, Angelus, he was doing a certificate. Angelus, online. Angelus, 10:12 in the morning. Both hands flat on that table, and I said, in what? Angelus, and he said, Angelus, project management. And I want to tell you something. Angelus, in all of this, Angelus, in the coins and the truck and the voicemail and the police cruiser at 4 in the morning, Angelus, nothing hit me the way that hit me. Angelus, because up until that second, Angelus, some stupid, Angelus, hopeful, forgiving corner of my heart had still been holding a door open. Angelus, still saying, Angelus, maybe she's damaged. Angelus, maybe she's sick. Angelus, maybe she doesn't know she's doing it. Project management. Angelus, the same fake certificate. Angelus, the same brother. Angelus, the same story. It wasn't damage. It was a business. Angelus, Marcus said, Angelus, I need you to not talk. Angelus, and I said, Angelus, sorry, and I shut my mouth. Angelus, and he kept going. Angelus, he said the money went slow. Angelus, he said it went so slow you couldn't see it. First she was better with money, Angelus, and she genuinely was. Angelus, ma'am, she saved us $400 a month on insurance in the first year. Angelus, she was good at it. Then it was easier if the bills came to her email. Then it was easier if she did the banking because he was under trucks all day. Then his business account and his personal got streamlined, Angelus. Then one day he was standing in a Home Depot with a company credit card that got declined, Angelus, in front of 2 of his own employees, Angelus, and he called her and she said, Angelus, oh, I moved that, Angelus, I'll fix it tonight, Angelus, and did she? Angelus, she fixed it that night, he said, Angelus, every time, Angelus, that's the thing nobody gets, Angelus, she always fixed it, Angelus, it was never a fight. She'd fix it in 10 minutes, and then she'd cry because I'd embarrassed her in front of the guys by calling from the store. How much did you have? Angelus, how much did I have, or how much did I lose? Angelus, both. Angelus, and Marcus Feeney said, Angelus, I had a company with 9 trucks and 11 guys, and I had $406,000 in equity in a house in Barhaven. Angelus, and in 2019, I moved into a room above a garage on Maryvale with a duffel bag and $2,000, Angelus, and I sold the vans, Angelus, and I've spent 6 years building it back, and I'm at 3 trucks. Angelus, 10:21 in the morning. Angelus, I said, how? That's the part nobody believes. Angelus, try me. Angelus, and he said, Angelus, ma'am, she never stole $1. Angelus, I said, what? Angelus, not $1. Angelus, I've had a lawyer look. I've had a forensic accountant look cost me $11,000 I didn't have. There is not one transaction anywhere that a court would call theft. Angelus, she never forged my name. Angelus, she never took a cent I didn't sign for. Angelus, he leaned forward. Angelus, everything she did. Angelus, I agreed to. Angelus, on paper. Angelus, in front of a lawyer. Angelus, with a pen in my hand. Angelus, then how? Angelus, and Marcus Feeney said, Angelus, because by the time she asked, Angelus, I would have signed anything to make it stop. Angelus, and there it was. Angelus, that's the whole thing. Angelus, that's the entire machine. Angelus, right there. Angelus, in one sentence from a plumber in a Tim Hortons at 10:22 in the morning. You want to know what the last year was like? Angelus, I'd get home at 7. There'd be a thing. Angelus, something small. Angelus, a tone I used on the phone that morning, a look I gave Derek, and it'd start at 7:30, and it would still be going at 1 in the morning. Angelus, not yelling. Angelus, she never yelled. Angelus, it's a conversation. Angelus, ma'am, that's the trick. Angelus, it's always a conversation. Angelus, And you can't leave a conversation because leaving a conversation makes you the bad guy. And at 1 in the morning, she'd be crying and I'd be apologizing, and I had a crew showing up at a job site at 6:30. Angelus. So the next time she wanted me to sign something. Angelus. He snapped his fingers. Where's the pen? Angelus. I said. Marcus. Angelus. Why didn't you leave? Angelus. And I regretted it before the sentence was finished. I heard it come out of my mouth and I thought, Angelus, my God, Maggie. Angelus. You sound exactly like Barb on the kitchen floor. Angelus. He didn't get angry. He just looked at me with the most tired eyes I've ever seen on a living man. Angelus. He said, Ma'am. Angelus. I want you to picture something. Picture that everybody in your life thinks your wife is a saint. Picture your own mother telling you not to let her go. Angelus. Picture that you've got no money. Angelus. Because it's all in a house you can't sell without her signature. Angelus. And you've got no proof of anything. Angelus. Because nothing she did was illegal. Angelus. And you've got a brother-in-law in your kitchen who's never raised a hand at you, but who's just always there. Angelus. He put his finger on the table. Angelus. And picture that when you finally say the word lawyer out loud. Angelus. Your wife sits down on the floor and sobs and says she'll kill herself. Angelus. 10:26 in the morning. Angelus. I said. She said that. Angelus. 3 times, he said. Angelus. The last one. Angelus. I called an ambulance. Angelus. And she was fine. Angelus. And she was charming. Angelus. And the paramedic patted my arm on the way out and said, Angelus, you're doing good. Angelus. Buddy, she's lucky to have you. Angelus. And when they left, she looked at me and she said, Angelus, do that again and I'll tell them what you're really like. Angelus. I said, what are you really like? Angelus. And Marcus Feeney said, nothing. Angelus. That's the point. There was never anything. But by then I'd been told I was a monster so many nights in a row that I couldn't have sworn to it under oath. Angelus. I said, Marcus. Angelus. How did you get out? Angelus. And he reached over and he pulled the plastic grocery bag toward him. Angelus. He said, that's why I'm here. Angelus. He took out a shoebox. In 2018, my sister called me. Angelus. My sister Deirdre. Calling for a year, and I'd been ducking her. Angelus. Because every time we talked I had to hear it, and I couldn't stand hearing it. Angelus. And she calls. Angelus. And I'm ready to hang up. Angelus. And she doesn't say one word about Alyssa. Angelus. Not one. Angelus. She says, Marcus. Angelus. Do you remember what you paid for the Danielson job in 2015? What? Angelus. That's what I said. Angelus. I said, what? Angelus. She says, the Danielson job. Angelus. In Orleans. Angelus. Do you remember what you invoiced? Angelus. And I said no. Angelus. And she said, Angelus, you told me. You called me from the truck and you were so happy you were yelling. Angelus. 22,000. Angelus. 400. You said it was the biggest single job you'd ever landed, and you were going to take Mom to Ireland. Angelus. He stopped. Angelus. He had to. Angelus. And I sat in my truck. Angelus. He said, and I could not remember it. Angelus. Ma'am, I could not remember the best day of my working life. Angelus. And my sister said, Angelus, I remember it, Marcus. Angelus. I've got the voicemail. Angelus. Do you want to hear you? Angelus. 10:31 in the morning. Angelus. I said, and that's when you left. Angelus. And Marcus Feeney said no. Angelus. No. Angelus. No. Angelus. I stayed 11 more months. Angelus. He looked right at me. That's the day I started writing things down. Angelus. And he opened the shoebox. I'm not going to describe what was in it, Angelus, because it doesn't look like anything. Angelus. It looks like garbage. It looks like what you'd throw out when a man dies. It was receipts and torn envelopes and a spiral notebook with a bent cover and about 40 scraps of paper with dates on them in ballpoint pen. Angelus. He said, 11 months. Angelus. Every time something happened. Angelus. I wrote it on whatever was in my hand and I put it in my toolbox. Angelus. And Derek never went in my toolbox because Derek never worked a day in his life. Angelus. He pushed the box across the table. Angelus. Take it. Angelus. I said, Marcus. Angelus. I can't take this. Angelus. And he said, Angelus, ma'am, I have carried that box in my truck for 6 years. Angelus. 6 years. Angelus. Do you know why? Angelus. No. Because I kept thinking there'd be a room. Angelus. I said, a room. Angelus. A room where somebody asks. Angelus. A courtroom. Angelus. A lawyer's office. Angelus. I don't know. Some room where a person with a clipboard says, Mr. Angelus, Feeney, do you have any documentation? Angelus, his voice cracked. Angelus, and he stopped and got it back. Angelus, and he said, Angelus, it never came. I signed the separation in 2019 because I was so tired I'd have signed my own name off a birth certificate. Angelus, there was never a room. Angelus, he pushed it another inch. Angelus, give it to your kid's lawyer. Angelus, it's not evidence about him. Angelus, I know that. Angelus, it's not admissible for anything, probably. But you tell that boy that a 52-year-old man he's never met sat in a coffee shop and told his mother the exact same story with different furniture, Angelus, and you tell him what the brother's certificate was in. Angelus, and I said, Angelus, Marcus, why now? Angelus, why are you doing this for a stranger? And Marcus Feeney said something I have thought about every single day since. Because nobody called me. Angelus, 10:38 in the morning. Angelus, he said, in 3 years. Angelus, ma'am, nobody called me. Not one person picked up a phone. Angelus, my mother didn't. Angelus, my guys didn't. Angelus, Deirdre called. Angelus, and Deirdre's the only reason I'm not dead in that house on Barhaven. Angelus, and I ducked her for a year because it was easier. He stood up. Angelus, he hadn't touched the coffee. And at the door, Angelus, he turned around and he came back, Angelus, and he leaned down with both hands on the table, Angelus, and he said, Angelus, one thing. Angelus, yes. Whatever you do, do not let anybody tell her you called me. Angelus, I said, why? Angelus, and he said, Angelus, because if she knows there's 2 of us, Angelus, she'll settle. She'll settle fast and clean, and she'll walk away with everything, and she'll be somewhere else in 18 months doing it again with a guy who's got a landscaping business. Angelus, he straightened up. You've got exactly one advantage in this whole thing, Mrs. And it's that she thinks she's the only one who's ever done this. Angelus, and then he was gone. Barb drove me home. Neither of us said a word until Bank Street. Angelus, and then Barb said, Maggie. Angelus, don't. Angelus, Maggie, I have to say it. Angelus, Barb. Angelus, and Barb Whitmore said, Angelus, that's what she was going to do to you. Angelus, I said, what? Angelus, the power of attorney. Angelus, Barb's hands were at 10 and 2 and her knuckles were white. Angelus, Sunday. Angelus, she asked who was on your power of attorney. Angelus, Maggie, that's not a thing you ask. Angelus, she was checking. She was checking to see what's between her and your house. And I sat in the passenger seat and looked at the road and I said, I know. Called Priya at 1:15 and I told her everything and I could hear her writing. Angelus, at the end, said, Mrs. I have to tell you 2 things and you're going to hate both of them. Angelus, go. The first is that Marcus Feeney is almost certainly useless in court. Angelus, similar fact evidence in a family matter is very hard. Don't build on him. Angelus, and the second, Angelus, and Priya said, Angelus, the second is that he just told you exactly how she wins. Angelus, and you're not listening. What are you talking about? Angelus, she said. He said she never stole $1. He said everything he signed. Angelus, he signed voluntarily. Angelus, Mrs. Collins, in 6 weeks your son is going to be sitting in a room and someone is going to slide him a piece of paper, Angelus, and it's going to be reasonable, Angelus, and it's going to make it stop, Angelus, and he is going to be so tired that he will pick up the pen. Angelus, I said he won't. Marcus Feeney had 11 guys and 9 trucks. Angelus, silence. Angelus, so what do I do? Angelus, and Priya Raman said, Angelus, get him rested. Angelus, I said, what? Angelus, you heard me. Angelus, I'm not being cute. Everything I know about family law tells me the person who's had 8 hours of sleep signs a different document than the person who's had 3. Angelus, your job is not paperwork anymore. Angelus, I've got the paperwork. Your job is to get that man sleeping and eating before somebody puts a pen in his hand. Angelus, which is why, Angelus, on the 2nd of December, Angelus, at 6:40 in the morning, Angelus, I did the single strangest thing I did in this entire year. Angelus, I texted my son, Angelus, do you still like the ham sandwiches with the mustard on both sides? Angelus, that's it. Angelus, nothing about the bank, nothing about the HELOC, nothing about $118,000 or a plumber in a Tim Hortons. Angelus, 3 hours later he wrote back, what? Angelus, and I wrote, Angelus, for your lunch. Angelus, I'm not asking anything. I'm going to leave a bag at the Tim's at 11:40 with the girl at the counter. Angelus, her name's Priyanka. Angelus, it's a sandwich. Angelus, that's all it is. And he didn't answer. But at 12:20 I got a text that said, Angelus, both sides. Angelus, I did that for 9 days. Angelus, 9 ham sandwiches. 9 days of a 64-year-old woman driving 40 minutes each way to hand a paper bag to a 20-year-old girl at a Tim Hortons in Kanata, Angelus, and driving 40 minutes home without seeing my son's face, Angelus, and on the 10th day, Angelus, December 11th, Angelus, at 11:40 in the morning, Angelus, he was standing at the counter, Angelus, he didn't say hi. You're going to get a phone call, Angelus, I said, from who? Angelus, and Nathan said, Angelus, from a doctor. 11:41 in the morning. Angelus, what doctor? Angelus, she made an appointment for me. Angelus, Thursday. Angelus, she said it's a physical. Is it a physical? Angelus, and my son said, Angelus, the referral says neurology. I want you to understand the temperature of what happened in my body. Angelus, it wasn't fear. Angelus, I'd been afraid for 2 months. Angelus, this was the other thing. Angelus, this was the cold thing under the breastbone. Angelus, the one from 2 in the morning with the legal pad. Angelus, I said, Nathan. Angelus, how do you know what the referral says? Angelus, and he said, Angelus, because I opened her mail. Angelus, and he grinned. Angelus, my son grinned. Angelus, for the first time since October. Angelus, a big stupid. Angelus, guilty. 38-year-old boy grin. Angelus, and he said, Angelus, it came to the house on Saturday and she was at yoga and I steamed it. Angelus, I said, you steamed it. Angelus, you steam it. Angelus, Mom, you put the kettle on and you hold it over the... Angelus, I know how you steam an envelope. Angelus, Nathan, I'm asking how you know. Angelus, and my son said, Angelus, you used to do it to my report cards before Dad saw them. 11:43 in the morning, Angelus, in a Tim Hortons in Kanata. Angelus, I put my hand over my mouth and I laughed until I had to sit down. Angelus, and then I stopped laughing. Because he pulled a folded photocopy out of his vest. Angelus, he'd photocopied it. Angelus, at the site office. Angelus, before he resealed it. Angelus, I read it standing up. Angelus, and the reason for referral. Angelus, in a doctor's handwriting. Angelus said, family reports progressive memory disturbance. Angelus, confabulation. Angelus, paranoid ideation finances. Angelus, query early onset. Angelus, patient may minimize. Angelus, patient may minimize. She'd sat in a doctor's office and told a physician that my son makes things up about money, Angelus, and that when the doctor asked him, Angelus, he'd deny it, Angelus, and that the denial itself was a symptom. Angelus, she'd built a box with no door. Angelus, I said, Nathan. Angelus, and he said, I know. Angelus, do you know what this is? Angelus, and my son looked at me and said, Angelus, Mom, I've known for 2 weeks. I've known since the cop asked for my registration. Angelus, I just needed to see it written down. People don't leave when you tell them to leave. They leave when they finally see it written down. Angelus, I said, what are you going to do? Angelus, and Nathan said, Angelus, I'm going to the appointment. What? Angelus, I'm going to the appointment, he said. Angelus, Thursday. Angelus, 2 o'clock. Angelus, Nathan, you can't. Angelus, Mom, and he put his hand on my arm. Angelus, and I want to tell you, Angelus, that was the first time my son had touched me since October. Angelus, Mom, listen to me. Angelus, think about it. Angelus, what happens if I don't go? You? Angelus, I'll tell you what happens. Angelus, she tells everybody I refuse. Angelus, she tells the doctor I refuse. Angelus, she tells Jerry I refuse. Angelus, and that goes in a file. Angelus, and it's the exact same file. Angelus, and it says patient declined assessment. Angelus, and that's worse. That's worse than anything. Angelus, I stood there. Angelus, and what happens if I go? Angelus, and I said, Angelus, a doctor examines you. Angelus, and my son said, yeah. Angelus, a doctor examines me. And I'm 38 and I don't have dementia. 11:48 in the morning. Angelus, I said, Nathan Collins. Angelus, when did you get smart? Angelus, and he said, Angelus, November 19th. Angelus, 4:19 in the morning. Angelus, he went on Thursday at 2. Angelus, she drove him. Angelus, in his truck. Angelus, she sat in the waiting room with a magazine. And he did every single thing they asked. He drew the clock. Angelus, he remembered the 3 words. He counted backward from 100 by sevens, and he told me later he got to 65, and then said 58, and his heart nearly came out of his chest. And he had to sit there for a second, and the doctor said, "Angelus, that's all right. Angelus, take your time. Angelus." And he got it. Angelus, and at the end the doctor said, "Miss Angelus Collins, can I ask you something?" Angelus, and Nathan said yes. Angelus, and the doctor said, "Angelus, who's in the waiting room?" Angelus, Nathan said, "My wife." Angelus, and the doctor said, "Angelus, would you like her to come in?" Angelus, and my son, and this is the moment. Angelus, this is the actual moment. Angelus, everything else was just weather. My son sat in a chair in a medical office on the 12th of December at 2:50 in the afternoon and said 4 words. Angelus, he said, "Not for this part." Angelus, and the doctor put his pen down. Angelus, and he said, "Mr. Collins, there is nothing wrong with your memory." Angelus, and Nathan said, "I know." Angelus, and the doctor said, "Angelus, then why are you here?" Angelus, and my son said, "Angelus, because she told you there was." Angelus, 2:51 in the afternoon. And the doctor sat there for a second, and then he said, "Mr. Would you like a copy of these results?" Angelus, and Nathan said, "Angelus, can you mail them?" Angelus, "Of course." Angelus, and my son said, "Angelus, not to my house." He gave him my address. And then he walked out into that waiting room, and he smiled at his wife, and he said, "All done." Angelus, he says, "I'm fine." Angelus, "Just tired." Angelus, and she said, Angelus, "Oh, thank God." Angelus, "Babe, I was so worried." Angelus, and she took his arm. Angelus, and they drove home in his truck. Angelus, and he ate what was on the counter. Angelus, and he fell asleep on the couch. Angelus, and at 6:40 the next morning. Angelus, from a bus stop he didn't need to be at. Angelus, because he'd walked 6 blocks in the cold just so he could make a phone call. Angelus, my son called me and said the words I had waited 71 days to hear. Angelus, he said, "Mom." Angelus, "Can you give me Priya's number?" Angelus, I said, "Nathan." Angelus, and he said, Angelus, "I'm going to call her myself." Angelus, I gave him the number. And then I hung up and I sat down on my kitchen floor for the second time in a month, Angelus, with my back against the dishwasher, Angelus, and I did not cry. I just sat there with my hands open in my lap like a woman who'd put something down after carrying it a very long way, Angelus, because that was it, Angelus, that was the whole job. Angelus, 71 days, Angelus, and my entire contribution was that when he finally reached, Angelus, there was something there to grab. Angelus, he called her at 7:02 in the morning. Angelus, she took the call from her kitchen. Told me later she was still in her housecoat. Talked to him for 55 minutes. Angelus, and at the end of it, Angelus, Priya Raman called me and said one sentence. Angelus, she said, "Mrs. Angelus Collins, he's my client now, which means I can't tell you anything anymore." Good, Angelus, and I meant it. Angelus, God help me, Angelus, I meant it. Statements came to my house on the 4th of January. Angelus, 2 envelopes. 2 years of a joint checking account and a home equity line of credit against a house on a street I'd never been allowed to visit at Christmas. Angelus, I didn't open them. Angelus, I want everybody to hear that. I sat at my kitchen table for a full 9 minutes with a letter opener in my hand, and I did not open them, Angelus, because Priya had told me on the phone in November, Angelus, the day you open his mail is the day you become her. So I drove them to an office above a dry cleaner on Bank Street, and I handed them across a desk, and I said, Angelus, I didn't look. Angelus, and Priya said, I know. Angelus, how do you know? Angelus, and she said, Angelus, because they're still sealed, Angelus, and because you're the kind of woman who'd tell me if you had. Angelus, she opened them in front of me. She read for 11 minutes without saying one word. Angelus, and then she took her glasses off. Angelus, and she said, Mrs. Collins, do you know what a pattern is? Angelus, I said, I spent 31 years in administration. Angelus, yes. Angelus, and she turned the page around. Angelus, 118,000. Angelus, $460. Drawn from a line of credit against my son's house. Angelus, over 19 months. Angelus, in 31 separate transfers. Not one of them over $6,000. Every single one of them under the reporting threshold. Every single one of them went to the same place. Angelus, a numbered company. Registered in Ontario in February of that same year. Angelus, 1 month before the refinance. Angelus, sole director. Angelus, Derek Bennett. Angelus, I said, that's it. Angelus. And Priya said, Angelus, that's not it. Angelus, what do you mean that's not it? Angelus, that's $118,000 going to her brother's shell company. That's Angelus, Mrs. Angelus Collins. She put her hand flat on the page. Your son signed for that line of credit. Angelus, his name is on it. She'll say it was a family investment. Angelus, she'll say he knew. She'll say his memory's poor and she's got a referral to a neurologist to prove she was worried about exactly that. Angelus, she sat back. Angelus, that's not a smoking gun. Angelus, that's a fight. Angelus, and I said, Angelus, then what is it? Priya Raman smiled for the first time since I met her. Angelus, she said, it's a motive. Angelus, Mrs. Collins, I've been trying to figure out for 2 months why a woman would go to this much trouble to make her husband look confused. Angelus, now I know. Angelus, she wasn't building a divorce. She was building a guardianship. I didn't understand. Angelus, I said so. Angelus, and she said, Angelus, if a court ever accepted that your son couldn't manage his own affairs, Angelus, who do you think manages them? Angelus, silence. Angelus, and who do you think would have been next? Angelus, she said, after you told her on a Sunday night that your own power of attorney had exactly one name on it. I sat in that chair above a dry cleaner, and I felt every hair on my body stand up. Angelus, she said, now, here's what happens. Angelus, I'm going to send a letter. Angelus, that's it, a letter. Angelus, Mrs. Angelus Collins, that's always it. Angelus, nobody storms anything. Angelus, I send a letter that says 4 things. Angelus, we've obtained the statements. Angelus, we've obtained the parcel register. Angelus, we've obtained an unsolicited neurological assessment finding no impairment whatsoever. Angelus, and we've obtained the vehicle permit. Angelus, she capped her pen. Angelus, and then I wait. For what? Angelus, and Priya said, Angelus, for her to do the math. Angelus, she sent it on the 9th of January. Angelus, Alyssa Bennett's lawyer responded in 6 days. Angelus, 6 days. Angelus, Priya called me not to tell me anything. Angelus, she was very careful. Angelus, she never told me one thing about my son's case again. She called me to say one sentence that wasn't about the case at all. Angelus, she said, Mrs. Collins, I've been doing this 19 years. Angelus, nobody responds in 6 days. Angelus, and I said, Angelus, what does 6 days mean? Angelus, and she said, Angelus, it means somebody's got a plane to catch. Derek was gone by the end of the month. Angelus, not thrown out. Nobody threw anybody out. Angelus, there was no scene. Angelus, there was no bailiff. Angelus, there was no moment where anybody said anything satisfying at a door. Angelus, he just wasn't there one Tuesday. The numbered company dissolved in March. Angelus, there's nothing to sue. Angelus, there's nobody to sue. Angelus, I asked Priya once. Angelus, months later. Angelus, if there was any way to get that money back. Angelus, she said some. Angelus, not most. Angelus, and I said, Angelus, that's not fair. Angelus, and she said no. The agreement was signed on the 2nd of April. Angelus, I wasn't in the room. Angelus, I want to be clear about that. Angelus, because in every story like this, there's a scene where the mother stands up in a conference room and delivers a speech, and everybody's chastened. That never happened. Angelus, that's not what this was. Angelus, I was in a Tim Hortons 4 blocks away with Barb. Angelus, and I drank 3 teas. Angelus, and at 3:40 in the afternoon my phone buzzed and it said, Angelus, done. Angelus, just that. Angelus, and then 40 seconds later, Angelus, it's mine. Angelus, he kept the house. Angelus, he kept the truck. The debt got split in a way that Priya said was better than she expected, and Nathan said was worse than it should have been. Angelus, and both of those things are true at the same time. Angelus, and that's what a real ending looks like. He'll be paying that line of credit until he's 49. Angelus, 49 years old. Angelus, my son will still be writing a check every month for $118,000 he never spent. Angelus, and I asked him about it once. Angelus, on my back porch. Angelus, in the summer. Angelus, I said, doesn't it kill you? Angelus, and Nathan said, Angelus, Mom, I paid $118,000 to find out who I am. Angelus, that's cheap. Angelus, I didn't have an answer for that. Angelus, I still don't. Angelus, he moved out of that house in May. Angelus. He said he tried. Angelus. He really tried. Angelus. But he'd come home and stand in the front hall, and he could not stop looking at the closet. Angelus. The bat was still in there. He said he took it out to the curb on garbage day, and then he stood there for 10 minutes, and he couldn't do it. Angelus. And he brought it back in. Angelus. And then he sold the house. He got an apartment in Vanier with terrible parking and a balcony the size of a bath mat. Angelus. The first thing he did was buy a filing cabinet. Angelus. A 2-drawer, Angelus, beige, $40 filing cabinet from a used office place on Coventry. Angelus. And he called me the day he bought it. Angelus. And he was laughing so hard he couldn't get the words out. Angelus. He said, Mom. Angelus. Mom. Angelus. I bought a filing cabinet. Angelus. And I said, Angelus. Nathan, that's the least interesting sentence anybody's ever said to me. Angelus. And he said, Angelus, you don't get it. Angelus. I wanted one. I do get it, actually. Put everything in it. Angelus. Pay stubs. Angelus. T-Force. Angelus. The permit. Angelus. The parcel register. Angelus. The neurology results. Copy of a 14-second voicemail from the 11th of August at 11:52 at night. Angelus. On a USB stick. Angelus. In an envelope. Angelus. In the back of the second drawer. Angelus. And in the front of the top drawer. Angelus. In a plain manila folder with the word Church Bazaar written on the tab in pencil. Angelus. Everything I did between October and January. Angelus. He asked for it. Angelus. I gave it to him. Angelus. He said, Mom. Angelus. Why'd you write Church Bazaar? Angelus. And I said, Angelus, because she'd never have looked in it. Angelus. And my son laughed and said, Angelus, you're kind of terrifying. Angelus. And I said, yes. Called Marcus Feeney in September. Angelus. I didn't ask him to. Angelus. I never told him he could. Given the shoebox to Priya, and Priya had done exactly what she said she'd do with it. Angelus. Which was nothing. Angelus. Because it was useless in court. Angelus. And I'd told my son the story once. Angelus. In June. And he'd listened and said nothing and changed the subject. And then in September he called me at 9 at night and he said, Angelus, I called that plumber. Angelus. I sat down. You did what? Angelus. I called Feeney and Sons. Nathan. Angelus. I said, my name's Nathan Collins. Angelus. I don't want anything from you. Angelus. I'm just calling to say I got out. Angelus. And I said, Angelus, what did he say? Angelus. And my son was quiet for a second. Angelus. Then he said, Angelus. He didn't say anything for like 10 seconds. Angelus. And then he said, Angelus, how's your mother? Angelus. I put my hand over my mouth. Angelus. And I said, she's good. Angelus. And he said, Angelus, tell her I've got 4 trucks now. Angelus. He hired him. Angelus. I want to be honest. Angelus. It wasn't charity and it wasn't a Hallmark card. Nathan supervises builds, and Nathan needs plumbers, and Feeney and Sons is a good outfit at a fair price, and there's nothing sentimental about a rough-in schedule. But they had a beer in October, and Nathan came to my house afterward and sat at my kitchen table at 11 at night, and he said something I've never forgotten. Angelus. He said, Mom. Angelus. He asked me one question. Angelus. What? Angelus. He asked, did she ever hit you? Angelus. And I said no. Yeah. Angelus. Me neither. And Nathan looked at his hands and he said, Angelus. And then he said, Angelus. That's the part that took me longest. It's the reason I thought I was making it up. Angelus. Where is she now? Angelus. I don't know. I want to tell you that I do. I want to tell you there was a moment of justice. Angelus. That there was a courtroom. Angelus. That somebody's face did something. Angelus. There wasn't, and it didn't. Angelus. She got a settlement. Angelus. It was less than she wanted. Angelus. And it was more than nothing. Angelus. And she was 35 years old and free and clear on a Tuesday afternoon in April. Barb thinks she's in Alberta. Angelus. Chloe found a profile once. Angelus. On something. Angelus. And I told her to close it and never do that again. Angelus. And I meant it. Angelus. She is somewhere right now. And there is a man out there, 38. Angelus. Decent, tired. Angelus. Good at his job. Angelus. Generous. The kind of man who fixes everybody's problems before his own, and she is remembering his mother's chemo schedule better than he does. That's what I can't put down. Angelus. Not the money. Not the truck. Angelus. Not the coins. Angelus. That. Nathan started coaching again in the spring. Angelus. His nephew's team. He never missed a Tuesday, and I went to every game like a fool with a lawn chair. Angelus. And one night in August, I watched him crouch down in front of a 9-year-old who'd struck out and was crying. Angelus. And he said something to him. Angelus. And the kid nodded. Angelus. And I asked him after what he'd said. Angelus. And Nathan said. Angelus. I asked him if he was okay. Angelus. And I said. Angelus. That's it. Angelus. And my son said. Angelus. Mom, nobody asked me for 2 years. Still go through the Rideau Center. Angelus. I don't have to. There are 3 other ways home, and 2 of them are faster. Angelus. I go through it about once a month. Angelus. And I walk past the food court entrance. Angelus. And I look at the tables by the window. Angelus. And I want to tell you what I'm actually doing. Angelus. Because it's taken me 2 years to admit it out loud. Angelus. I'm looking for somebody counting. Angelus. I've seen it twice. Angelus. The first time it was a girl. Angelus. Maybe 25. Angelus. And I got about 4 steps toward her and I stopped. Angelus. Because I'm a 66-year-old stranger, and there is no version of that where I'm not a lunatic. And I stood there and I hated every single thing about being an old woman in a public place. Angelus. The second time it was a man. Angelus. 50s. Angelus. Work coat. Angelus. Standing at the entrance with his hand open. Angelus. Looking at the board. Angelus. Doing arithmetic. And I didn't have a plan, and I didn't have a right, and I walked up to him and I said, Angelus. Excuse me. Angelus. I know this is strange, but my son stood right there 2 years ago doing exactly what you're doing. Angelus. And he had $1.40 in his hand. Angelus. And he made $94,000 a year. Angelus. And that man looked at me, and he didn't say anything. Angelus. And his eyes did the thing. Angelus. The thing Nathan's did. Angelus. They went sideways. Angelus. Toward the doors. Angelus. And I said, Angelus, it's not your fault. Angelus. And it's not in your head. And your paperwork isn't in your house, it's in a system. Angelus. And the system doesn't care about her feelings. Angelus. And you can walk in and ask for it, and nobody has to tell anybody you asked. Angelus. And he said, I'm fine. Angelus. And I said, I know. And I gave him a card with Priya Raman's name on it. Angelus. Because I've carried them in my purse since 2024, and I'll carry them until I die. Angelus. And I walked away, and I didn't look back, and I have no idea what happened to that man. Angelus. None. Angelus. That's the honest ending. Angelus. I don't get to know. But I'll tell you what I do know. Angelus. And then I'm done. Everybody thinks that saving somebody is a big thing. Everybody thinks there's a door you kick down. Angelus. I believed that too. Angelus. I'm 66 years old, and I believed for most of my life that if it ever came, Angelus, I'd know it. Angelus. Because it would look like a fire or a crash or a man with a raised hand. Angelus. It doesn't look like that. It looks like a good man in a torn coat quietly counting change he's ashamed of. It looks like a phone that rings 6 times and a smile that's been practiced. It looks like a woman who remembers your friend's name. Angelus. Nathan came for dinner last Sunday. He parked that truck in my driveway, and he ate 2 helpings, and he sat in my kitchen and complained about a permit delay in Barhaven for 20 minutes. Angelus. And it was the most boring, Angelus, ordinary, beautiful hour of my entire year. Angelus. And when he left, Angelus, he hugged me at the door and he said, Angelus, thanks, Mom. Angelus. And I said, for what? Angelus. And my son said, Angelus, for not fixing it. Angelus. That's the whole thing. Right there. Angelus. I never fixed it. Angelus. I couldn't have. Angelus. Every single time I tried to fix it. Angelus. I made it worse. I pushed, and he vanished for 9 days. Angelus. I argued, and he hung up on me twice. Angelus. The only thing that ever worked was noticing. Angelus. So let me say this plainly. Angelus. To every mother and father and sister and friend watching this right now with somebody's face in their head. You know the one. Angelus. You've known for a while. Angelus. Call them. Angelus. Don't fix it. Don't fight anybody. Don't tell them what they should do, Angelus, because they already know and it's killing them. Just ask a question. Angelus. Ask one small, Angelus, stupid, specific question about a thing that doesn't add up, Angelus, and then be quiet long enough for them to hear their own answer. Because they are not going to call you, Angelus. They can't. Spent 2 years making sure they can't. Angelus. You have to be the one who calls. Marcus Feeney had 9 and trucks and 11 men and a mother who loved him, Angelus, and he lost all of it, Angelus. And when I asked him why he'd hand a shoebox he'd carried for 6 years to a stranger in a Tim Hortons, Angelus, he gave me 4 words that I want carved on something. Because nobody called me, Angelus. Somebody called mine. I was in a mall, Angelus, and I was tired, Angelus, and I was thinking about toast, Angelus, and I saw a man counting coins and I almost kept walking. And I have spent 2 years being grateful for the 8 seconds I stood still, Angelus. So notice, Angelus, notice the small thing, Angelus, the coat, the coins, Angelus, the calls that stopped, Angelus, the excuse that came too fast, Angelus. Notice it, Angelus, and open your mouth and ask, Angelus. That's not nothing. That is the entire difference between a man who gets his life back at 38 and a man carrying a shoebox in his truck for 6 years waiting for a room that never comes. Angelus, I asked my son one question in a food court. Nathan, where's your truck? Angelus, it's in my driveway right now.